Chapter 13:18. Murong Yu's soul power was like a dragon, unleashing the most violent attacks in Bai Lin's soul space. It forced most of Bai Lin's power into his soul space. While destroying Murong Yu's soul power, he also protected his own soul. But the flame of primal chaos from Murong Yu's yin-yang cauldron also made Bai Lin feel a strong sense of danger. He knew that if the yin-yang cauldron killed him, he would be severely injured, if not killed. Whoosh! While Bai Lin was defending himself, Murong Yu had already turned into a streak of light, passing through time and space and appearing next to the little girl. Then he grabbed the angry little girl, flapped his wings, and soared into the sky. During this process, Murong Yu's soul pond was still rioting. Streaks of terrifying power pierced through the void, madly attacking Bai Lin. But when Murong Yu left, the yin-yang cauldron slammed into the void and flew back into Murong Yu's body. Murong Yu didn't plan to use the yin-yang cauldron to kill Bai Lin. That was impossible. Plus, even if they were lucky enough to kill Bai Lin, it would only draw out more powerful cultivators from the Broken Star sect. Now that Murong Yu didn't have his broken finger, if he was trapped, he would die without a doubt. As expected, when Murong Yu left, several figures soared into the sky from the Broken Star City. Streaks of powerful aura burst out from their bodies, quickly dissipating into the distance like a tide, suppressing everything. They were all imperishable realm cultivators. All of this happened too quickly. Only now did they react. Then, they stepped into the air and quickly appeared near Bai Lin. Kill them. Now Bai Lin saw that he had crushed Murong Yu's soul power. Even so, his soul was slightly affected. He was slightly injured, but it wasn't a big deal. When he said those words, Bai Lin had already soared into the sky. The imperishable realm cultivators of the Broken Star City were a bit confused, but they still chased after him. However, there was no trace of Murong Yu in the sky. With their speed, they had already rushed out of the range of their divine sense. However, Bai Lin's face was filled with rage as he chased after him. It was as if he knew where Murong Yu had gone. Far away from Scattered Star City, Murong Yu finally stopped and let go of the little lowly's hand. "I'm so angry. Big baddie, why don't you kill him for me?" Previously, when she was bombarded by Bai Lin to the point where she could not fight back, the little lowly was completely enraged. She could not help but want to go back and kill Bai Lin. Murong Yu's face was filled with black lines. The little lowly was obviously no match for the other party. Wouldn't she be courting death if she went back? Immediately, he said with a dark expression, "If you want to go back, go ahead. I'm not interested in going back." As he spoke, Murong Yu flew forward. At the same time, he sent a strand of his divine sense into Hichu Luo Shu to sort out Bai Yixian's treasures. 5 high-grade sacred artifacts. This was Murong Yu's biggest gain. In addition to these 5 sacred artifacts, there were some mid-grade and low-grade sacred artifacts, as well as some other heaven and earth treasures and pills. However, those things were useless to Murong Yu. He was only interested in the 5 high-grade sacred artifacts. As long as he refined them, Murong Yu's strength could at least increase by a small realm. He could reach the 5th level of the Great Saint, or even the 6th level of the Great Saint. Now, he could not wait to find a place to refine these sacred artifacts to increase his cultivation. Big baddie. Oof. Seeing Murong Yu leave without looking back, the little lowly thought for a moment and finally followed. Suddenly, Murong Yu turned his head and looked behind. For extremely powerful and terrifying auras surged over from the distant horizon like tidewater. In the blink of an eye, 4 figures with terrifying auras appeared in Murong Yu's line of sight. When she saw the 4 people, the little lowly excitedly grasped her giant axe and could not help but rush forward to fight them. "It's Bai Lin and the others?" Murong Yu frowned slightly, a trace of surprise flashing across his face. It should be known that after leaving Fragmentary Star City, he did not walk in a straight line to the end. Along the way, he changed directions a few times. If it was an ordinary person, it would be difficult to track him. However, Bai Lin seemed to know his exact location and directly chased after him. Moreover, other than Bai Lin, the other 3 were all undead stage powerhouses. The power radiating from each of them was much stronger than Bai Lin's. Let's go. After recovering from his shock, Murong Yu grabbed the little lowly again and disappeared in a flash. Half a day later, they changed directions dozens of times. Now, even they did not know where they were. They won't chase after us like this, right? Murong Yu muttered in his heart, a trace of coldness flashing across his eyes. However, what shocked him was that not long after, Bai Lin and the others appeared in Murong Yu's line of sight again. What tricks do they have? They can actually track us? Can they also see the auras left in the void? Murong Yu was extremely depressed. He finally understood how those people felt when they were tracked by him before. This kind of follower that could not be shaken off made him extremely unhappy. Now, he could not beat them in a fight, nor could he escape. Murong Yu could directly use the Hichu Luoshu to teleport, but he could only teleport back to where he had been before. Then, wouldn't these days of travel be a waste? Even if he teleported back, who knew if they would wait for him in the same place? Or would they track him no matter where he was? That would be equivalent to Lu Haozong being chased by the Blood Rain ancestor. In the end, Lu Haozong was forced to escape into the chaotic secret plane, where he lived for countless years. Even now, he was still recovering from his injuries in the Hichu Luoshu. Murong Yu did not want to end up like Lu Haozong. They definitely have our auras and are using the connection between our auras and our true bodies to track us. No matter where we go, we won't be able to escape. Just as they were about to leave, the little lowly suddenly said, "There's such a god art." Murong Yu could not help but be a little surprised. The little lowly nodded. This god art is usually only used by people with extremely high cultivation levels. They're only in the imperishable realm, so it's impossible for them to cultivate this god art. They must have a saint artifact with this function. Unless we destroy their saint artifact, no matter how big the holy world is, they can still catch up, the little lowly added. Murong Yu's face darkened. If he could destroy their saint artifact, then he could destroy Bai Lin and the others. Why would he need to run like a stray dog like they were now? For imperishable realm cultivators. If I increase my cultivation level by 1 or 2 more levels, I might be able to kill Bai Lin. But there are still 3 imperishable realm cultivators. Murong Yu frowned. In his previous battle with Bai Lin, he roughly knew Bai Lin's strength. As long as he could take Bai Lin's attacks head-on, he could use his soul power to kill Bai Lin. But the other 3 were a little difficult to deal with. However, the little lowly's eyes exploded with a dazzling light. You really have the power to kill Bai Lin? If you can, I have a saint artifact that can trap the other 3 for a short time. As long as we kill Bai Lin and take his saint artifact, they won't be able to catch up to us. Really? Murong Yu looked at the little lowly. The little lowly fiercely nodded her head. Being chased all the way made her, an unparalleled beauty with unparalleled beauty, feel extremely sullen. Plus, she had wanted to kill Bai Lin for a long time. In that case, let's enter my spatial treasure first. Murong Yu thought for a moment, then grabbed the little lowly and entered Hichu Luoshu. Then, with a thought, he too and Luoshu disappeared on the spot. When they reappeared, they were already back in Scattered Star City. Hichu Luoshu couldn't stay where they were. Bai Lin and the others would imprison them, or even take them down. Couldn't they track them down? Then let them go back and forth. They disappeared. After Murong Yu and the little lowly left, Bai Lin's group of 4 finally arrived. If Murong Yu was here, he would be surprised to see 2 illusory shadows in front of the 4 of them. They were exactly the same as Murong Yu and the little lowly. Clearly, they were formed from the auras of Murong Yu and the little lowly that Bai Lin had captured. That's the direction of Scattered Star City. After arriving, the 2 illusory shadows pointed in the direction of Scattered Star City. Even if they flee to the ends of the earth, they'll still die. An imperishable realm expert said in a low voice, "Anyone who kills a disciple of the Scattered Star sect will be hunted down endlessly." Bai Lin nodded, his eyes shooting out 2 rays of incomparably bitter resentment. Then, his figure flickered, and he shot towards the Scattered Star City. Within Hichu Luoshu, the little lowly pestered Murong Yu, her face full of shock. What a miraculous spatial treasure. Big baddie, hurry up and tell me, how did you do it? But before Murong Yu could speak, the little loli began talking to herself. In the entire world, there's only one treasure that can teleport, the Hichu Luo Shu. But Hichu Luoshu's owner has always been a chaotic celestial body. Are you a chaotic celestial body? Murong Yu's face flickered, but he quickly suppressed it. However, the little loli had been staring at Murong Yu's face all this while. Naturally, Murong Yu's reaction couldn't escape her eyes. Then the little loli laughed. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone that you're a chaotic celestial body. Don't forget, you're my husband. Murong Yu's face was a bit unnatural. What chaotic celestial body? I've never heard of it. Don't play dumb with me. You know very well whether or not you're a chaotic celestial body. You'd better hurry up and cultivate. Maybe they'll be here soon. The little loli glared fiercely at Murong Yu, then looked outside at Scattered Star City. It was precisely because Murong Yu had opened a corner of the He-Tu and Luo Shu that the little loli knew that they were in Shattered Star City and that they were in He-Tu and Luo Shu. I miscalculated, Murong Yu muttered. He hadn't expected the little loli to know about the Hichu Luo Shu and the chaotic celestial body. But now she knew. When the boat reached the bridge, it would cross that bridge. He gave the little loli a deep look, then took out the 5 sacred grade sacred artifacts and began cultivating. Chapter 13:19. Even the trashiest high-grade saint artifact could unleash power equivalent to an imperishable stage expert. Some of the best high-grade saint artifacts could even rival a peak imperishable stage expert. One could only imagine how terrifying a high-grade saint artifact power was. Not long after Murong Yu started smelting the sacred artifact, a thunderous sound came from his body, which had already reached the 4th order Great Sage realm. Following that, an aura that was more than 10 times stronger than before erupted from his body, causing ripples to appear in the surrounding space and even shatter it. He broke through. Seeing this, little loli looked at Murong Yu in shock. It had been less than a day since Murong Yu started cultivating. Even those peerless geniuses don't cultivate so fast, right? How can he refine high-grade saint artifacts with his strength? Right, he has a chaotic celestial body. It's said that every chaotic celestial body is capable of smelting anything. Seeing that Murong Yu was still cultivating, the little loli's face was filled with curiosity. She couldn't help but want to ask Murong Yu how he could refine high-grade saint artifacts and use their power to increase his own cultivation. However, she didn't interrupt Murong Yu's cultivation. 5th level Great Sage. My strength has increased by at least a little. With my current strength, I can easily kill 6th level or even 7th level Undying Stage experts, right? A smile appeared on Murong Yu's face as he sensed his growing strength. But the amount of power needed to break through is too much. To break through to 5th level Great Sage from the peak of 4th level, I actually exhausted an entire high-grade saint artifact's power. Murong Yu felt somewhat helpless. At this rate, it would be difficult for him to increase his strength in the future. Where is he going to find an item that contained a large amount of power for him to refine? What a fast speed. He just broke through to 5th level Great Sage half a day ago, and now he's already at the peak of 5th level Great Sage. It seems he'll break through to 6th level Great Sage soon. Seeing Murong Yu's cultivation rising, little loli was even more shocked and curious about Murong Yu. Not good. At this moment, the little loli's divine sense that was extended to Fragmentary Star City suddenly discovered by Lin's group of 4 shooting over from afar like meteors. It took them more than a day to rush back, and they were heading straight to where they were. Big baddie, they're coming. The little loli resisted the urge to rush out and fight with Bai Lin and the others. She quickly reminded Murong Yu. They're in Fragmentary Star City. Bai Lin and the others rushed into Fragmentary Star City like shooting stars. But soon, Bai Lin couldn't hold back his anger. This was because he had discovered that Murong Yu and Bai Yixian's aura were above Bai Yixian's original residence. Provocation. This was definitely a naked provocation. Even this was an insult to Bylin. Son of a bitch, I'll kill them right now. Bylin was furious. As soon as he rushed into Fragmentary Star City, he couldn't help but throw a punch. The terrifying power directly broke through the void, like a divine dragon blasting towards Murong Yu and the others. Rumble by Ishian's residence, which had been razed to the ground by Bylin, was once again ravaged by the terrifying power. The violent power blasted a huge crater in the ground. Looking from afar, it was a shocking sight. But what made Bylin furious was that Murong Yu and Bai Ishian's aura disappeared again. The two figures of Murong Yu and the little lowly turned around at the same time to look behind them. After the little lowly's reminder, Murong Yu, who was cultivating, immediately teleported away from Fragmentary Star City. Just as they were about to leave, Bylin's attack came down. If he was a moment slower, Hichu Luoshu would be hit. With Murong Yu's current strength, it would be hard for him to block the attack of an undead stage expert. If that were to happen, Murong Yu would be injured and his breakthrough to the next realm would be interrupted. If he wanted to continue, it would take a long time. Boom, boom, boom. Bylin was so furious that he felt like he was about to explode. Punch after punch blasted out, causing the ground to be in a mess. How can that little bastard be so fast? How can he suddenly disappear and return to Fragmentary Star City? It's like he teleported? An undead stage expert from the Fragmentary Star sect frowned in disbelief. Teleport? Are you kidding me? Bylin sneered, but then frowned deeply. The undead stage expert was telling the truth. But how had they teleported? Fragmentary Star City had never had a teleportation array. Can his saint weapon travel through the void? That's the only way he could be so much faster than us. Another undead stage expert said excitedly. Travel through the void. Bylin and the others were stunned. Saint weapons were extremely rare, but they weren't non-existent. It was said that the ability of this kind of sacred weapon was extremely terrifying. It could easily travel through the void, and the stronger the weapon, the further it could travel through the void. There were even legends of saint weapons that could travel through the entire holy world. Thinking of this, the three undead stage experts were all excited. Even Bylin, who had lost his son, couldn't help but show greed in his eyes. Saint weapons didn't need to travel long distances. Even tens of millions of miles or hundreds of millions of miles would be heaven-defying for them. If they had a saint weapon like that, even ancient saints wouldn't be able to do anything to them. And clearly, Murong Yu's saint weapon didn't stop there. It easily traveled a distance that would have taken them more than a day at full speed. What if he really has a saint weapon like that? Why didn't he just run away? Why did he stay here? Why did he leave after we arrived? The third undead stage expert asked in confusion. That little bastard is only a great saint. He doesn't have enough power to use that saint weapon. Using it once would have used up all of his power. He probably stopped here to recover his strength. If we had arrived earlier, that little bastard wouldn't have been able to escape. Bylin's murderous intent surged, and his eyes shone with greed as he spoke. Everyone nodded, thinking that this should be the case. Then, they looked at each other, rose into the air again, and chased after Murong Yu. As for why they didn't report Murong Yu's saint weapon to the sect, they hadn't even considered this question. Only an idiot would report this. Wait for the sect's experts to take the saint weapon away? After Bylin and the others flew out of Shattered Star City, Murong Yu and the little girl appeared in the area before they teleported back to Shattered Star City. Murong Yu's habit was to habitually place a teleportation point no matter where he went. Peak 5th level Great Saint. He's about to break through, right? Seeing Murong Yu sitting cross-legged and cultivating, the little girl couldn't help but guess. Sure enough, before she finished speaking, Murong Yu's body shook violently. Then, an aura 10 times stronger than before erupted. 6th level Great Saint. He'd advanced by 2 levels in 2 days. He was a monstrous existence. Is this the cultivation speed of a chaotic celestial body? Isn't it a little too fast? The little lowly was somewhat dumbfounded as she looked at Murong Yu, who had just made a breakthrough. She had the urge to strangle him to death. Her aptitude was also monstrous, but compared to Murong Yu, she was nothing. While the little girl was shocked, Morongyu laughed bitterly in his heart. Breaking through from peak 4th level Great Saint to 5th level requires a high-grade Saint weapon. To reach peak 5th level from 5th level requires the power of 2 high-grade Saint weapons. If it weren't for the large number of Chaos Saint Veins in Hichu, Luoshu, 2 high-grade Saint weapons wouldn't have been enough to break through to 6th level Great Saint. Even so, more than 70% of the Chaos Saint Veins have been consumed. 6th level Great Saint. He hadn't even reached the peak yet. Morongyu had a feeling that refining a high-grade Saint weapon would only allow him to break through to 9th level Great Saint at most. If he wanted to break through to the Undead Realm, he would probably need a top-grade Saint weapon. After entering the Undead Realm, high-grade Saint weapons might not be of any use to him. If the Undead Realm required a top-grade Saint weapon, then the Undead Realm required a top-grade Saint weapon. If he stepped into the Profound Sage Realm, wouldn't he have to refine a Saint-grade Saint weapon? Thinking of this, Morongyu's body couldn't help but shiver. Although there weren't many Saint-grade Saint weapons in the Holy World, the Holy Land was so big and there were so many cultivators. There should be a lot of Saint-grade Saint weapons. But what if he reached the Ancient Sage Realm? Wouldn't he have to refine an ancestral weapon to break through? An ancestral artifact? Morongyu sighed as he shook his head to clear his mind of those thoughts. After all, these were matters for the future. As the saying goes, when the boat comes to the bridge, things will go straight. There is no need to worry about so many advantages now. You've refined those 5 high-grade Saint artifacts? Seeing Morongyu stop cultivating, the little girl couldn't help but walk over and ask. Morongyu nodded. There was no need to keep it a secret. However, the little girl jumped up in fright. Then, she stared at Morongyu and said in a sharp voice, "You prodigal. Those were 5 high-grade Saint weapons, not 5 low-grade Saint weapons. You actually broke through 2 small realms? You're really too prodigal." Speaking of this, the little girl patted her slightly raised chest and seemed to be relieved. Fortunately, you're not a woman. Otherwise, who would dare to marry you? No one can afford to raise you. But the little girl frowned again. You're so prodigal. If you don't have any ability, then won't you have to starve? Aya, you big bad guy. If you weren't my husband, I definitely wouldn't be with you. Morongyu's face darkened. He hadn't even said a single word, yet this little lowly had already blabbered on and on. How could he endure this? Moreover, what husband? Was it just the little girl's opinion? He didn't seem to agree. Okay, let's not talk about these meaningless things. Our guests are here. We should go out and welcome them. Morongyu glared at the little girl. Then, with a thought, the two left Hichu Luoshu and appeared in the Holy World. Chapter 1320. Why aren't they running anymore? Bai Lin and the others rushed over. When they saw Morongyu and little Lowly standing there and watching them quietly, they couldn't help but look at each other. The same question appeared in their minds. Perhaps they're not strong enough to continue running. Have you given up? An Undead Realm expert said with a smile. To them, Morongyu and little Lowly were in the Great Saint Realm and the Undead Realm respectively. They were just ants that could be easily trampled to death. Bai Lin's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Morongyu in the distance. The depths of his eyes were full of covetousness. Attack at the same time. Kill them directly to prevent any accidents. Bai Lin's voice sounded in the other three's ears. The 3 of them nodded in unison. In a flash, they had already arrived in front of Morongyu and his companion. Rumble, at the same time, they attacked. For large hands tore through the void. Like 4 huge dragons, they roared and grabbed at Morongyu and Jian Wushuang, ready to devour them. 4 Undead Realm experts attacked at the same time. The power shook the sky. If it were an ordinary Great Saint Realm or Undead Realm expert, they would have turned around and fled. They might have even gone limp from fear. However, Morongyu and little Lowly weren't ordinary people. In the face of their attacks, their faces even revealed confident expressions. Bai Lin and the others were naturally surprised. However, there was no hesitation in their attacks. Let's do it, Morongyu said faintly. Little Lowly nodded slightly, and waved her hand. Suddenly, a golden light shot out. The golden light was as fast as flowing light. It tore through the void and rushed to the top of Bai Lin and the others' heads in an instant. At the same time, the golden light expanded with the wind. In an instant, it grew into a bell-shaped sacred weapon with a radius of several meters. This is the Great Sky Soaring Bell. Although its grade isn't high, its binding power is very strong. Little Loli's voice sounded in Murong Yu's ears. As the little Loli spoke, the soaring sky spiritual bell fiercely shook in the void. Suddenly, the sky was filled with golden light. It was as dazzling as the sun in the sky. A terrifying aura burst out at the same time, shaking the void around the great spiritual bell and causing it to collapse. Streaks of golden energy instantly enveloped the void within a radius of 1,000 miles, directly enveloping Bai Lin and the other three. At the same time, the great spirit bell once again transformed into a golden light and swiftly smashed down. Instantly, a terrifying suction force seeped out from the bell, enveloping Bai Lin's group and pulling them towards the bell. Immediately, the power of Bai Lin's group was sucked in by the suction force of the bell. What a terrifying suction force! This great sky-soaring spiritual bell is at least a peerless saint artifact, right? Looking at the dazzling light of the great spiritual bell, Murong Yu suppressed the urge to smelt it with great difficulty. Bai Lin and the others were caught off guard. Their bodies were sucked in by the suction force. Immediately, they were all shocked and came to their senses. Then, a terrifying power burst out from their bodies. Like a violent wave, the power blasted towards the soaring sky spiritual bell. But at this moment, the soaring sky spiritual bell fiercely shook again. An extremely powerful power burst out, tearing through the void like a flood. It ruthlessly slammed into Bai Lin, who couldn't react in time. Immediately, Bai Lin was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. With one less person, the power to resist the soaring sky spiritual bell increased by a fraction. On the contrary, the soaring sky spiritual bell's power increased by a fraction. Under the little Loli's control, the soaring sky spiritual bell exploded with supreme power. It actually slowly sucked in the other three undead stage experts. However, the little Loli didn't have it easy either. With her current strength, controlling such a high-grade saint artifact was a bit strained. Moreover, she had to suppress three undead stage experts at the same time. Haha! At the same time that Bai Lin was sent flying, Murong Yu had already rushed forward with a loud laugh. Halfway there, his soul power tore through the void like a stormy sea. It transformed into an incomparably huge net in the void. It ruthlessly enveloped Bai Lin. At the same time, the Yin-Yang Cauldron revealed a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. It burned with a primal flame that could incinerate everything as it ruthlessly attacked Bai Lin. At the same time, the Dragonbone Flame Needle shot out. It exploded with balls of soul attack and strangled Bai Lin. With his current soul power, it wasn't a problem for him to control several saint artifacts at the same time. Seeing Murong Yu coming for him, Bai Lin's killing intent skyrocketed. His murderous aura soared as he wanted to kill Murong Yu. But at this moment, Murong Yu's spiritual power was the first to attack. After witnessing the strength of Murong Yu's soul power, Bai Lin instantly divided a large portion of his power into the soul space to protect his soul. However, Murong Yu's soul power was endless. It was like a stormy sea that attacked him, wanting to kill him. And the Yin-Yang Cauldron also gave Bai Lin an extremely strong sense of danger. Facing Murong Yu's unprecedentedly powerful attack, Bai Lin retreated rapidly. During this process, a battle sword shot out from his body. It cut through the void and actually slashed directly at the Yin-Yang Cauldron that was ruthlessly attacking him. Kill! Murong Yu roared as the He Tu and the inscription of the Luo floated above his head. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Bai Lin and unleashed 1,000 armies elephant-pulling fist. You're courting death. Seeing Murong Yu, a mere great saint, attacking him at close range, Bai Lin's lungs were about to explode. Murong Yu was looking down on him, so he roared and punched out at the same time. Boom! The attacks from both sides collided violently in the void and exploded with an earth-shattering sound. After the collision, Bai Lin, who was in the eternal realm, only shook violently a few times. On the other hand, Murong Yu's entire body was sent flying. Bai Lin's murderous aura surged. He took a step forward and was about to chase after Murong Yu. However, at that moment, a loud, muffled sound was heard from the sky. Suddenly, Bai Lin's mind felt like it had been punched by someone. It was almost torn apart. Bai Lin was shocked and raised his head to look. He saw that his battle sword had been shattered into billions of pieces, and the yin-yang cauldron only paused for a moment. Then it broke through the void and continued to attack. You destroyed my upper-grade sacred weapon. Bai Lin roared, his murderous aura growing stronger. That sacred weapon was the best of the upper-grade sacred weapons. It was comparable to an ordinary top-grade sacred weapon, and it had been nurtured by him for many years. The power it released was even more terrifying than an ordinary top-grade sacred weapon. But now, it had been destroyed by the yin-yang cauldron. This was the difference between sacred weapons. No matter how much power a low-grade sacred weapon could release, it was far inferior to a high-grade one. It would be shattered upon collision, just like a great saint and a supreme, no matter how heaven-defying or powerful the great saint was. But a supreme could easily kill him. Bai Lin's mind was instantly damaged. After that, his power couldn't help but stagnate for a moment. But in that moment, Murong Yu's soul power found an opportunity. It tore a bloody path through Bai Lin's vast ocean-like power and headed straight for his soul. Bang! Although Bai Lin reacted quickly and hurriedly mobilized his power to attack the soul power. However, the soul power still smashed into his soul. After a loud bang, a part of Bai Lin's soul was annihilated. More than 10% of it was destroyed. Although it wasn't a serious injury, it wasn't a light one either. At the same time, the yin-yang cauldron came down with terrifying power. The yin-yang cauldron could easily destroy Bai Lin's upper-grade sacred weapon. His body wasn't as strong as the sacred weapon, and now, most of his power was gathered in his soul space. He didn't have much power to protect himself. If it was just an ordinary sacred weapon, he could withstand it. But the flame of primal chaos made him tremble in fear. Once it came down, even his power would be burned, let alone an ordinary sacred body. Thus, he quickly retreated. Bai Lin, you will die today. Murong Yu laughed and rushed forward. But what shocked him was that even though most of Bai Lin's power was in his soul space, the terrifying aura that erupted was still terrifying enough to destroy heaven and earth. If he hadn't reached the 6th level of the Great Saint Realm and had the power to kill a high-level undead realm expert, he probably wouldn't have been able to get close. But now, he had the Hichu Luoshu to reduce part of the power, so it was quite easy for him. Soul power, the yin-yang cauldron, the dragonbone flame needle, and his own power. The four-pronged attack was so violent that it forced Bai Lin, an undead realm expert, to retreat. In fact, it was because Bai Lin was only at the 1st level of the undead realm. If it were a high-level undead realm expert, Murong Yu wouldn't have been able to get close. And Murong Yu's soul power couldn't break through the defense of a high-level undead realm expert. Seeing Bai Lin being forced back by a great saint, the other 3 undead realm saints of the Broken Star sect dropped their jaws. It was too unbelievable. But it wouldn't be easy for Murong Yu to kill Bai Lin either. Big bad guy, hurry up and kill Bai Lin. I can't hold on much longer. At that moment, the little girl's voice rang in Murong Yu's ears. Murong Yu was shocked. When he turned around, he saw that the little Loli's face was somewhat pale, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. God's descent. Murong Yu gritted his teeth and used a move he hadn't used in a long time. If it weren't for the fact that his soul didn't have any offensive moves and could only attack with brute force, he would have killed Bai Lin long ago. Chapter 1321. A gigantic, blurry shadow of a giant appeared above Murong Yu's head. A powerful, mysterious, and irresistible power shot out from the giant's shadow, sweeping in all directions. It instantly enveloped Bai Lin, little Lowly, and the others. At this moment, other than Murong Yu, Bai Lin, little Lowly, and the others were stunned. They were momentarily distracted. They lost their minds. The mind was different from soul power and cultivation. It was something that couldn't be seen or touched. However, once the mind was completely destroyed, that person would die. It could be said that the mind and soul were equally important. To a certain extent, the mind could even control the soul and power. When Bai Lin lost control of his mind, his soul and power instantly stopped moving. Although deity's descent only affected Bai Lin for 1/100th of an instant. However, this was enough time for Murong Yu to kill him. If Murong Yu was stronger, he could kill Bai Lin thousands of times in this time. While Bai Lin's power came to a standstill, Murong Yu's spiritual strength tore a huge crack in Bai Lin's power. Then, the spiritual strength continued forward and ruthlessly twisted Bai Lin's soul. Bai Lin's soul trembled violently. His entire body was trembling from the intense pain. The intense, tearing pain instantly woke him up from his absent-minded state. However, it was too late. Murong Yu's soul power was like a huge net that bound his soul. His soul power even formed billions of huge sabers that slashed at his soul in a frenzy. Every time he slashed, Bai Lin roared in pain. With every slash, a part of Bai Lin's soul was destroyed. In 1/100th of an instant, Bai Lin's soul wasn't completely destroyed. However, 60% of it was destroyed. 60% of his soul was destroyed. It was a serious injury. It would take countless years for him to recover. However, how could Murong Yu give him time to recover? The soul pool began to move violently. Streaks of soul power materialized and shot out to kill the soul pool. At the same time, the yin-yang cauldron also came crashing down. With his soul severely damaged, Bai Lin's strength rapidly declined and soon fell to the high-level undead realm. At this time, he was no match for Murong Yu. After he tried his best to avoid the yin-yang cauldron's attack, Murong Yu teleported in front of him. 1,000-army elephant drawing fist. It was a simple punch, but it contained all of Murong Yu's power. All of it landed on Bai Lin's body. With Murong Yu's strength, he could already kill high-level undead experts. Therefore, after a loud explosion, more than half of Bai Lin's body was blown up by his punch. His physical body was destroyed, and his cultivation level, which had fallen to the high-level undead realm, fell again to the 7th level of the undead realm. This realm posed no threat to Murong Yu. With his strength greatly reduced, Bai Lin was finally unable to resist Murong Yu's soul power. With a thought from Murong Yu, the heavenly net formed by his spiritual power abruptly contracted. Bai Lin immediately let out an incomparably mournful scream. The remaining soul was directly swept out of the soul space by Murong Yu's soul power. Kill. Once the soul left the soul space, it was even more vulnerable without the protection of power. With a thought, Murong Yu easily destroyed Bai Lin's consciousness. The moment his soul and consciousness were erased, the remaining half of Bai Lin's body was no longer of any use and fell directly to the ground. Bai Lin was killed. A dignified undead realm expert was killed by Murong Yu, a 6th-level great saint. Seeing this, little Lowly and the others couldn't help but be shocked. When did a great saint's strength become so terrifying? He could actually kill an enemy 2 levels above him. One must know that in the holy world, it was normal for some geniuses to kill enemies 1 or 2 levels above them. It wasn't that there weren't people who could kill enemies 1 level above them, but it was very, very rare. Other than the monster Murong Yu, there was no one else who could kill an enemy 2 realms higher than himself. In fact, there were many reasons why Murong Yu had such strength. The most important was that he was a soul-sanctified saint. If it weren't for the soul attack, Bai Lin would have just stood there and let him kill him. He probably wouldn't have been able to kill him. Secondly, Murong Yu's body was extremely strong and could directly resist Bai Lin's aura. Otherwise, if Murong Yu couldn't even get close to Bai Lin and enter the range of his soul attack, it would be useless no matter how strong his soul power was. Also, his strength was indeed very strong. Even without a low-grade saint artifact, his body had the ability to kill a high-level undead realm expert. And this powerful strength, combined with his powerful body, allowed him to resist the aura of a low-level undead realm expert. Of course, there was another important reason. Murong-Yu's treasures and battle skills were just as strong. If it weren't for God's descent affecting his mind, he wouldn't have been able to quickly kill Bai Lin. None of the 4 conditions could be missing. Without one, it wouldn't be Murong-Yu killing Bai Lin, but Bai Lin killing him. The holy world was vast, and there were countless monstrous geniuses. But there were just too few people who met all 4 conditions. There was almost none. Of course, there should be such people in the holy world, but they just hadn't heard of them. When Bai Lin was killed, a powerful and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the back mountain of the Shattered Star sect. A beam of holy light shot into the sky and condensed into a solid form. It seemed to pierce through the heavens. The aura swept out in all directions like a tide, enveloping the entire Shattered Star sect and Shattered Star City. It even extended hundreds of millions of miles away. What a terrifying aura! Countless saints were enveloped by this aura. Even those who had reached the ancient saint realm couldn't help but tremble. Their souls seemed to be suppressed. The aura of a holy ruler. Someone from the Shattered Star sect has broken through to the holy ruler realm. The nearby ancient saints were shocked. Bai Chonglao has finally taken the final step and reached the holy ruler realm. Our Shattered Star sect has one more holy ruler. Although the disciples of the Fragmentary Star sect were suppressed to the point of suffocation, they were different from the others, but they were all overjoyed. The more holy rulers they had, the stronger the Shattered Star sect would be, and the more benefits they would receive. But soon, they discovered that Bai Chonglau's terrifying aura, which had suppressed them to the point of being unable to move, suddenly went berserk. It seemed to contain a towering rage. Who killed my son? Bai Chonglao roared angrily. Then, the disciples of the Shattered Star sect saw a streak of light rise from the back mountain. It tore through the void and flew out of the Shattered Star sect. As the streak of light flew further and further away, the terrifying aura enveloping them also quickly dissipated. Bai Lin, the city lord of Shattered Star City, was killed. Hearing Bai Chonglau's roar, countless people of the Shattered Star sect were stunned. However, the expressions of some of the experts of the Shattered Star sect changed. Bai Chonglau's son was killed at the same time as his breakthrough. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Could it be that the enemy's sect deliberately did this to kill Bai Chonglao, who had just broken through? And so, after Bai Chonglao, several streaks of light shot into the sky, emitting terrifying auras. They tore through the void and chased after Bai Chonglao. Each of them emitted an aura that was several times stronger than Bai Chonglao's. They were all holy rulers of the Shattered Star sect. They had broken through earlier than Bai Chonglao, so they were naturally much stronger than Bai Chonglao, who had just broken through to the holy ruler realm. Bai Lin was actually Bai Chonglao's son. That was easy to explain. Otherwise, with so many profound sages and ancient sages, none of them were qualified to become the city lord of Shattered Star City. Bai Lin, a mere imperishable realm cultivator, had become the city lord. However, Murong-Yu had actually killed the son and grandson of this newly ascended holy ruler. The enmity between him and this holy ruler was huge. However, not to mention that Murong-Yu didn't know that Bai Lin had a holy ruler as his father. Even if he knew, he would still kill him. He even dared to offend the Shattered Star sect. So why would he be afraid of a mere holy ruler? Moreover, Heavenly Fire City wasn't weak either. Hadn't he offended them, all the same? However, Murong-Yu didn't know any of this. With a wave of his hand, he took Bai Lin's spatial ring into his hand. His incomparably powerful divine sense immediately extended inside. Then he saw his and the little lowly's phantoms inside the ring. This should be how they tracked us. With a thought, Murong-Yu immediately annihilated the two phantoms. Then, a white bead appeared in his line of sight. Just as he was about to investigate this bead, he heard the little lowly's anxious voice. Turning his head, he saw that the little lowly was having a hard time holding on. The three imperishable realm cultivators seemed to be about to break through the shackles of the soaring sky spiritual bell. He immediately put the spatial ring into the Hichu Luoshu world, then stepped in front of the little lowly. Might as well kill them all. Seeing Muronyu walk over, the little lowly took out a handful of pills and threw them in her mouth. Then she became energetic. Those pills must be top-grade holy pills to replenish energy. Kill them. Muronyu was stunned. He originally wanted to kill Bai Lin and then leave. However, these people had chased him for so long that he was full of anger. Can you still hold on? Muronyu turned to the little lowly. The little lowly nodded fiercely, her murderous intent overflowing. If that's the case, then let's work together to kill them. You're responsible for holding them back for a while. I'll go increase my strength first. These people were much stronger than Bai Lin. With his strength, it would be difficult to kill them one by one. Bai Lin had a few high-grade holy weapons in his spatial ring. After refining them, he could at least increase his cultivation by a small level. The little lowly was stunned. You're going to break through again? However, she quickly reacted. I can't hold on for a day or two. Don't worry. Perhaps I'll be out in a few breaths. With a smile, Muronyu's figure disappeared in a flash. Chapter 1322. A few breaths of time, the lowly pursed her lips. Even if Muronyu was a peerless genius, a peerless monster, there was no way he could break through a minor realm in a few breaths of time. After all, breaking through to the next realm required an extremely long time. Let's see if you can really do it in a few breaths of time. I can't hold on for a day. The little lowly controlled the soaring sky spiritual clock as she began to count. A few hours passed in a flash. Then, Muronyu's figure appeared in her line of sight. You definitely haven't started cultivating yet. You just went in for a stroll, right? The lowly looked at Muronyu in disbelief. But soon, her face was filled with shock. Muronyu was originally a 6th-level great sage. He hadn't even reached the peak of the 6th level. But now, he was an 8th-level great sage. He broke through 2 minor realms in a few breaths of time. The lowly thought she was hallucinating, so she looked at Muronyu seriously again. Then, she realized she wasn't hallucinating. But wasn't this a little too shocking? You really broke through 2 minor realms? The lowly asked in shock, her face filled with disbelief. As the saying goes, what you see is true. But even if the lowly saw it clearly, she still couldn't believe it. It was just too hard to believe. Peak of the 8th-level great sage. Muronyu smiled, his face filled with confidence. When he was a 6th-level great sage, Muronyu was strong enough to kill a high-level great sage. After breaking through 2 minor realms, Muronyu felt like he could fight Bai Lin directly. He didn't even need to use soul attacks to kill him. In other words, Muronyu's strength was comparable to a 1st-level undead realm expert. The lowly still looked at Muronyu in shock. How did you do it? Because of her shock, her hand trembled. The undead realm experts of the Shattered Star sect almost knocked her out of the soaring spirit bell and sent her flying. At this moment, the 3 imperishable stage experts were roaring furiously, their faces flushed red with anger. The 3 of them were trapped by an undead realm expert. This was simply too humiliating. If word of this got out, how could they still have the face to stay in this world? Could it be time acceleration? You can control the rules of time? Little lowly suddenly exclaimed. Her voice was a little sharp. Muronyu's face darkened. If I could control the laws of time, I would have killed them long ago. Time acceleration is real, but that's just the ability of my treasure. A treasure that can accelerate time? Is it Hichu Luoshu? The little lowly stared at Muronyu. She even had the thought of chopping Muronyu to death with her axe, and then snatching the Hichu Luoshu. You control the great sky, soaring spiritual bell. I'll go kill the 3 of them. In the end, the little lowly did not do anything to Muronyu. Instead, she wanted to give Muronyu control of the great spirit clock. Muronyu rolled his eyes. The great sky, soaring spiritual bell was the little lowly's treasure. It had recognized her as its master. Even if she gave Murong control it, Murong would only be able to use a small portion of its power. Whether that level of power could trap the 3 undead realm experts was still a question. Leave your mind imprint on it, and erase my mind imprint, the little lowly said without a care in the world. Murong face showed surprise. He jokingly said, "You're not afraid that I'll swallow your treasure after this? This treasure is at least of the peerless rank, right?" Little lowly immediately looked at Murong with disdain. "If you're really so despicable, then I'll take it that I misjudged you. But you're a prodigal son. I'm really worried that you'll refine this sacred treasure. But forget it. If you refine it, then refine it. Hurry up." As she spoke, the little lowly became impatient. Murong muttered to himself for a moment, then attached his mind to the great sky soaring spiritual bell. With little lowly's strength, after controlling this sacred treasure, she would no longer be able to control the huge axe. And if Murong controlled this sacred treasure, little lowly would be able to free up her hands to attack the 3 undead realm experts. It should be known that the huge axe ignored any power. So much so that Murong's mind already imagined the 3 undead realm experts being chopped to death by little lowly's axe. Because little lowly had taken the initiative, Murong directly imprinted his mind on the great sky soaring spiritual bell. Immediately, his incomparably enormous power surged into the great sky soaring spiritual bell like a torrent. Rumble. Receiving Murong's incomparably enormous power, the great sky soaring spiritual bell fiercely shook. An aura several times more powerful than before burst out, intimidating the 10,000 worlds. Suddenly, the great sky soaring spiritual bell, which had been frantically trembling from the bombardment of the 3 undead realm experts and was about to be sent flying, suddenly stabilized in the void, remaining motionless. But the 3 undead realm experts felt as if they had sunk into a swamp. An incomparably enormous power was surging from all directions, suppressing them and making it difficult for them to move. Even the power in their bodies had stagnated. This sacred treasure is so powerful. Murong was startled. If it was only suppressing one of the 3, I'm afraid they wouldn't even have the ability to resist. Even if it's a high-level undead stage expert, it should be able to suppress him. Moreover, Murong discovered that the power of the great sky soaring spiritual bell that he was currently using was perhaps not even a tenth of its original power. Most importantly, this great sky soaring spiritual bell could display its power regardless of the realm of the person. Suppressing enemies above their realm was not a problem at all. Of course, the stronger one was, the more powerful the power would be. Murong had a feeling that if he reached the profound sage realm, this great sky soaring spiritual bell might be able to suppress super powerhouses of the Saint King realm. Seeing Murong suppress the 3 undead realm experts to the point that they were almost unable to move after taking over, the little lowly couldn't help but feel depressed. Wasn't this gap too big? She was an undead realm expert, all right? Compared to Murong, she was a whole realm higher. In fact, this was because Murong had broken through 2 more minor realms. If he had controlled the great sky soaring spiritual bell before killing Bai Lin, he probably wouldn't have been able to suppress these 3 undead realm experts. Glaring at Murong somewhat unhappily, the little lowly once again took out a handful of pills and swallowed them. Presumably, controlling the great sky soaring spiritual bell had consumed a lot of her energy. However, these holy pills of hers were also miraculous. After swallowing them, she was immediately full of energy. So, carrying the giant axe, she turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the 3 suppressed people. Seeing the little lowly coming over, the 3 undead realm experts showed disdainful smiles on their faces. Being trapped and unable to escape was one thing, and being able to kill them was another. They were confident that even if they stood there and let the little lowly hack at them, the little lowly wouldn't be able to kill them. This was the gap between the undead realm and the undead realm. Unfortunately, What they didn't know was that if the little lowly was an ordinary undead realm sage, she might not be able to kill them. However, the little lowly was no ordinary sage. Just as the little lowly was about to make her move, Murong Yu's voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Kill the one in gray first. The little lowly couldn't help being startled, but she still swung her axe at the gray-robed, undead realm expert. Soul attack. Almost at the same time the little lowly made her move, Murong Yu launched a soul attack on the expert. An incomparably strong aura of death instantly shrouded the gray-robed, undead realm expert's mind. Almost at the same time he reacted, Murong Yu's soul power had already rushed into his soul space like a torrent, quickly strangling his soul. The gray-robed, undead realm expert was shocked. He hurriedly gathered his power and rushed into the soul space, wanting to crush Murong Yu's soul power. However, at this moment, the soaring great spiritual bell fiercely shook. An extremely powerful force directly bombarded his body. His entire body was sent flying out in an instant, and the little lowly's axe just happened to come down. From afar, it looked like the gray-robed, undead realm expert had automatically met the little lowly's axe. Serene didn't know why Murong Yu sent him flying, but the gray-robed, undead realm expert didn't care. He didn't even plan to block the attack of the huge axe. As a result, the other two undead realm experts were shocked to see the gray-robed, undead realm expert being cut in half by the little lowly's axe like a piece of tofu. Then there was no more then. The gray-robed, undead realm expert's life had completely disappeared along with him being cut in half. Seeing this scene, the two undead realm experts were deeply shocked. A bad feeling welled up in their hearts. There are two more. The little lowly cheered, then looked at one of the remaining two. It's him. With a thought, Murong Yu's enormous soul power once again strangled over. However, this person didn't even get hit by the little lowly before his soul was destroyed by Murong Yu. Because after one person died, the soaring great spiritual bell's power skyrocketed, already suppressing the two undead realm experts to the point where they couldn't move. Moreover, their power seemed to have completely frozen. Therefore, Murong Yu's soul power went straight in, directly destroying the opponent's soul. However, Murong Yu only destroyed the consciousness in his soul, then grabbed the soul from a distance. The soul of an undead realm expert was a great supplement, able to increase the strength of his soul. As for the soul of the undead realm expert that was killed by the little lowly, although Murong Yu didn't want to waste it, he discovered that the person's soul didn't have any power, as if his soul power had been swallowed by the huge axe. Big baddie, you actually dared to steal from me. The little lowly angrily glared at Murong Yu, then charged at the last undead realm expert with her axe. With a thought, Murong Yu's soul power once again strangled over. He didn't want this person's soul to also become trash, unable to be used. However, at this moment, several extremely terrifying auras quickly swept over from a distance. In an instant, they crossed a distance of a few trillion miles and rushed over. In fact, before they even got close, that terrifying aura had already attacked Murong Yu's soul, causing it to tremble. One could imagine how terrifying their strength was. Chapter 1323. Stop! Before Murong Yu and the others could even see the person's appearance, a thunderous voice tore through the void and rumbled through the air. Wherever it passed, even the void was shattered. Boom! As soon as the voice reached them, a blinding holy light exploded from the little girl's body. However, she was sent flying like a broken rag doll. Fortunately, the power sealed in her body exploded in time, saving her life. Thus, even though he was sent flying, he wasn't injured at all. It was just that his chi and blood were churning. However, Murong Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. She was sent flying like a little Lolita. Tian Meng had left a seal on him that could block many powerful attacks and protect his life. However, Murong Yu had to take the initiative to activate this power. Of course, if Murong Yu was truly on the verge of death, the power would activate on its own. What terrifying power! The life force in his body quickly washed over him, and his injured body immediately recovered to its peak state. However, those people's violent and powerful auras were getting stronger and stronger, because they were getting closer and closer. They're even stronger than those from Skyfire City. Even if Broken Finger still had power, it'd be difficult to kill them. Those from Skyfire City are all ancient saints. Then there's Saint Kings. Ha! Little bastard, you're dead. Those are all Saint Kings from Shattered Star City. I forgot to tell you, Bai Lin and Bai Yixian are the son and grandson of one of the great elders of Shattered Star City. He should have broken through to the Saint King realm. Just as Murong Yu was wondering about the newcomers' identities, the Shattered Star sect cultivator bound by the bell suddenly laughed arrogantly. Murong Yu's pupils constricted, and a vicious look flashed through his eyes. Immediately, violent soul force shot out of his forehead again. It tore through space and viciously charged into the soul space of the imperishable realm expert from the Shattered Star sect. You still dare to kill me? The imperishable stage expert's face was filled with disbelief. In his mind, Murong Yu already knew that it was a saint ruler from the Broken Star sect. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't he have fled immediately? Murong Yu sneered and directly erased the spiritual consciousness of the other party's soul. At this moment, the imperishable stage expert's face was still filled with disbelief. Little bastard, you still dare to kill people. Another angry roar was heard. This time, although Murong Yu was prepared, he was still shaken to the point of spitting out blood. His fleshly body, which had reached the level of a low-grade sacred artifact, was actually shaken to the point where cracks began to appear. As for the little lowly, she was once again sent flying. I'm so angry. After being sent flying twice in a row without being able to retaliate, the little lowly's anger soared to the sky. She bared her fangs and claws, but it was useless. Murong Yu turned his head and looked deeply at the saint rulers who were quickly approaching. His figure flashed, and he rushed to the little lowly's side with a teleport. In the next moment, he grabbed the little lowly and flashed into the Hichu Luoshu world. Then, he teleported away. Rumble. Just as Hichu Luoshu teleported away, a monstrous hand with a terrifying aura that could shatter heaven and earth came down from the nine heavens. The void and earth within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles were torn apart. But Murong Yu had long since disappeared without a trace. He escaped. In the blink of an eye, the saint rulers from the Broken Star sect appeared where Murong Yu had been. When they saw the corpse of the undead realm expert, the saint rulers of the Broken Star sect all frowned in anger. This was especially true for Bai Changlao, Bai Lin's father. Terrifying killing intent erupted from his body like a storm, condensing into a solid impact that rippled the surrounding void. A few saint rulers spread out their tremendous divine senses, covering a radius of hundreds of millions of kilometers. But they didn't find anything. Unable to find Murong Yu and the others, Bai Changlao became more and more furious. Powerful and terrifying forces kept rushing out, trying to shake Murong Yu out of the void. But it was all in vain, because Murong Yu was long gone. In the end, Bai Changlao and the others gave up. The giant hand reached out, and a scene flashed in their eyes. It was the scene of Murong Yu killing Bai Lin and the others. Little bastard. When he saw Murong Yu, Bai Changlao punched out in anger and directly shattered Murong Yu's image. One could only imagine how angry he was. You killed my grandson. This is an irreconcilable enmity. Everyone, I've decided to hunt you down. Before that, I'll leave the Shattered Star sect to you. After a long while, Bai Changlao fiercely suppressed the anger in his heart and turned to the saint rulers of the Shattered Star sect. Then, before the saint rulers could react, he had already soared into the sky and quickly disappeared from their sight. Puffed. In the Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. But under the cleansing of the life force, he recovered to his peak state in an instant. Good thing I came in a bit earlier. Otherwise, even a Hichu Luoshu wouldn't have been able to come in if I had been a bit slower. And if I didn't enter the Hichu Luoshu in time, I definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. Yu thought with lingering fear. There was nothing like the Tianming broken finger that contained enormous power that could kill a saint ruler. Therefore, before he had absolute strength, he wouldn't come into contact with these super experts in the future. Withdrawing his mind from the great soaring spiritual bell, he returned the heaven-defying sacred artifact to the little lowly, who was sulking alone at the side. This is so infuriating. The little girl's face darkened, and she looked extremely unhappy. If it was before, not to mention saint rulers, even ancestral sages would have to be respectful to her. Who knew that after sneaking out, she would be attacked by some juniors? How could she not feel depressed? But in addition to being depressed, the little girl also felt that this was the real life. Her previous life was really too boring. No matter where they went, they were treated with respect and were firmly protected, just like flowers in a greenhouse. Although she was suffering setbacks now, this was how she could grow quickly. When she thought of this, the depressed look on the little girl's face immediately disappeared, and she recovered her original confident appearance. However, her quick change of expression made Yu shake his head continuously. As the saying goes, a woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea. As long as it was a woman, it was the same regardless of age. "Husband, are you okay now?" Yu Mengqing and the others walked over and asked with concern. It's okay. We killed all those people, even though he had provoked someone even more powerful than him. But in the future, we will come back and kill all of them." Before Yu could answer, the little girl chattered on about what had happened in the past few days, like a child showing off to an adult. Although Yu Mengqing and the others smiled, they were still a little scared. Those were imperishable realm experts, and there were even saint rulers. But in addition to being worried, they were also happy for Yu, because Yu was getting stronger and stronger. Yu didn't join them, but picked up the pearl that he had taken from Bai Lin and studied it. The power contained in this pearl wasn't strong, and it wasn't even as strong as a low-grade saint weapon. But when Yu recognized it as its master, he was shocked to find that this pearl could contain some people's aura, and it could create the appearance of the original aura. What surprised Yu the most was that the original aura created by this pearl could actually track the original aura. Although surprised, Yu quickly figured out the theory behind it. The reason why the original aura could track the original aura was because it reacted with the aura of the original aura in the void. However, this pearl wasn't omnipotent, and it could only track within a certain distance. Once it exceeded this distance, it would be useless. To a certain extent, it was even more convenient than you tracking the original aura. After all, you could only follow the aura when tracking the original aura. But this pearl's illusion could sense the position of the person being tracked from a certain distance, and then it could directly travel in a straight line. This should be just a replica. The legendary saint weapon can be tracked as long as it doesn't leave the holy world. The little girl walked over after showing off and said something shocking. There really is such a saint weapon? Yu was shocked. Don't worry, it said that the saint weapon has gone missing. Some people suspect that it's been destroyed, so you don't have to worry about being tracked. The little girl smiled. But even replicas are rare in the holy world. The Shattered Star sect is already heaven-defying to have one. We don't have to worry about being tracked down. Let's hope so. Yu smiled and said indifferently. However, they did not leave He Tu and Luo Shu for the rest of the time. After killing the other 3 imperishable stage experts, Yu took all of their storage rings. Although each of them didn't have many high-grade saint weapons, they still had several. It was enough for Yu to break through to the next level. And so, Yu began cultivating again. After refining 7 or 8 high-grade saint weapons, he broke through to the peak of the 9th level Great Sage. He was only 1 step away from the Undying stage. Once he broke through to the Undying stage, time would have no effect on him. This was because his lifespan would be endless. He would truly be immortal. Of course, it was only immortality. It didn't mean that he wouldn't die. After all, who knew how many Undying stage experts had died at Yu's hands? Chapter 1324. The Desert of Death was located in the far west of the holy nation of Nainin. On the other side of the Desert of Death was another superpower of the human race in the holy world, the Blood Dragon Holy Nation. The Desert of Death was not originally called the Desert of Death. However, after many people died, it became the Desert of Death. It was a forbidden zone for sages. Anyone who entered the Desert of Death would be killed. Therefore, after a long time, no one dared to enter the Desert of Death. In fact, almost no one dared to stay near the Desert of Death. On this day, a group of 8 people tore through the void and shot over from afar. Finally, they stopped in the void outside the Desert of Death. They were Murong Yu's group. After Murong Yu's strength broke through to the peak of the 9th level Great Sage, he left Hichu Luoshu and rushed over. After several months of rushing, they finally appeared here. Is this the Desert of Death that countless sages would turn pale at the mention of? I don't think it's anything special, Kurlan said casually as she looked at the endless desert. Indeed, in their line of sight, the desert before them was calm and tranquil. What entered their eyes was a yellow sky, but there was no danger. Even Murong Yu looked at Wen Yi suspiciously, as if he was questioning something. Only Wen Yi's face was solemn. He looked at the desert, as if he was looking at a prehistoric beast. I've heard about this Desert of Death for a long time, but I never had the chance. Now, I finally have the chance to enter. Little Loli carried her giant axe and jumped up. She could not help but rush in. The Desert of Death is very dangerous. It's still fine in the periphery. However, the deeper we go, the more dangerous it is. We can't be careless. Wen Yi said with a solemn expression. Murong Yu nodded and released his powerful divine sense. Then, the group stepped into the desert. Whoosh! When the group stepped into the Desert of Death, they were shocked. The temperature inside the desert was completely different from outside. The temperature outside was only slightly higher than the other places. However, the temperature inside the desert was countless times higher than outside. In an instant, Mu Liyue and the others felt as if they were in a furnace. Although the temperature was much higher, they could still withstand it with their strength. Thus, they shot toward the depths of the Desert of Death. Not long after Murong Yu and the others entered the Desert of Death, a figure with a terrifying aura flew over from afar. In the end, they stopped outside the Desert of Death. He was none other than the saint ruler of the Broken Star sect, Bai Chonglao. Entered the Desert of Death. Bai Chonglao immense divine consciousness spread out and extended into the Desert of Death. However, he did not see Murong Yu and the others. If Murong Yu and the others were not dead, then they must have left the range of his spiritual will. Could it be that he wants to cross the Desert of Death and go to the Blood Dragon Saint Country to avoid being hunted down? Bai Chonglao frowned and thought. If Murong Yu knew what Bai Chonglao was thinking, he would definitely laugh out loud. Bai Chonglao thought too highly of himself. Murong Yu did not enter this place to avoid their pursuit. He entered this place because of the cultivation method in the Desert of Death. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, you can't escape from me. Bai Chonglao sneered and rushed into the Desert of Death in a flash. Not long after Bai Chonglao entered, several auras that were even more powerful than Bai Chonglao shot over from afar. They were none other than the many experts of the Sky Slaughter sect who had come to hunt down Murong Yu. All of them were Saint King Realm super experts. They all entered the Desert of Death. The Saint Ruler frowned. Does that little bastard know that we're hunting him down? Is that why he lured us into the Desert of Death? He has a treasure that can travel through the void. Maybe they've already left the Desert of Death. Nonsense. The Sky Slaughter sect, Sky Fire City, and Broken Star sect's hunting order has caused an uproar in the Nainin province. Countless people want to kill Murong Yu. Moreover, after knowing that Murong Yu has a treasure that can travel through the void, even more people are hunting him down. As he spoke, the Saint Ruler glanced at a saint who was shooting over from afar. It was an ancient saint. At this moment, he was looking at the Desert of Death hesitantly. The third Saint Ruler raised his eyebrows and looked at another Saint Ruler in confusion. That Saint Ruler could only explain, for the past few months, Murong-Yu has swaggered through the provinces and cities. How could he be afraid of us? I don't think he's just luring us in. I guess he entered the Desert of Death with a purpose. Maybe there's something good in the Desert of Death. The other people's eyes lit up. Murong-Yu killed Li Di and destroyed one of our saint weapons. We can kill him and take his treasure that can travel through the void. If there are other treasures in there, we can take them as well. With our strength, no matter how dangerous the Desert of Death is, we can still give it a try. Then, the experts of the Sky Slaughter sect rushed into the Desert of Death. After them, the ancient saint who had been hesitating finally gritted his teeth and rushed in. He had no enmity with Murong-Yu. He just wanted to take Murong-Yu's treasure that could travel through the void. Not long after, the experts of Sky Fire City also chased after them. There were also other experts and forces that had arrived. Although some people hesitated and didn't dare to enter the Desert of Death, most of them still rushed in. It's so hot. Sidu Xian stopped and wiped the sweat on her forehead. She was speechless as she looked at the vast desert that was the same color as the sky. Aside from Murong-Yu, everyone else was in the same situation as Sidu Xian. They were all sweating profusely, so much so that even their clothes were soaked. At a glance, everyone's faces were red from the heat, and wisps of white steam were coming out of their heads. Originally, they had ascended from the sky, but after entering the Desert of Death, they quickly came down to walk on the ground. In the sky, the temperature was higher, and the consumption was greater. I'm so thirsty. Hubby, do you have any water? Lon Kier looked at Murong-Yu with her big, watery eyes and a pitiful look on her face. Murong-Yu glared at her, but he still took out some water from the Hichu Luoshu for everyone to drink. The Hichu Luoshu was similar to a real world, so it naturally didn't lack water. This Desert of Death is really worthy of its name. We haven't encountered any danger yet, but the temperature is already so terrifying. Gongsun Ning-Yu patted her chest, which was still a little young, and showed a look of lingering fear on her face. Hearing this, everyone nodded. They were all saints. Even if they were roasted by fire, they wouldn't be hurt at all. Furthermore, things like sweating and feeling thirsty had long been out of their reach. In fact, except for Murong-Yu and Yu Mengqing, everyone else had an extremely high starting point. After they were born, they were immune to the cold and heat. Sweating was still okay. They would still sweat if they were in a more urgent situation. But thirst, it was the first time they had such a phenomenon. This is only the edge of the Desert of Death. Legend has it that the deepest part of the Desert of Death is a place where even experts like the Holy Emperor don't dare to enter. When he wiped the sweat on his forehead and said in a deep voice, if it weren't for the fact that he wanted to repay Murong-Yu for saving his life, he would never set foot in this desert again. At this rate, you will be roasted dry soon. All of you, enter my spatial treasure. Murong-Yu glanced at everyone. The girls shook their heads. We can't miss such a good opportunity. It won't be too late to go in if we really can't withstand it. Let's go, quickly go in. Thus, everyone continued to move forward. But not long after, they all stopped and looked at Murong-Yu. Don't you guys feel oppressed? Like there's an unstoppable danger attacking us? Murong-Yu's senses were the strongest. He was the one who felt the danger and stopped. Everyone looked at each other. Then, Gongsun Ning-Yu frowned and said, I feel the same. I feel like we were being watched by someone. Do you guys feel the same? After Gongsun Ning-Yu, everyone finally felt that something was wrong. You guys, what is that? Suddenly, little Loli's high-pitched voice sounded. Everyone turned their heads to look, only to see an incomparably huge yellow light shooting over from afar. Murong-Yu's mind moved, and an enormous divine sense spread out. At this moment, Wen Yi's face suddenly changed, and he exclaimed, Death Sandstorm. Before anyone could ask, Wen Yi quickly explained, This is the sandstorm of the Death Desert, sweeping up yellow sand. The bigger the sandstorm, the more powerful it is. Legend has it that even existences like the primal Chaos Ancestor Sage would be easily torn apart by the Death Sandstorm. Moreover, in addition to the hurricane and yellow sand, there are other terrifying things in the Death Sandstorm. Those things are extremely powerful and can easily tear apart superpower houses. Quick, we have to leave this place. Otherwise, when the death sandstorm comes, we will die without a burial place. When he was anxious. At this moment, Murong Yu's divine sense had already reached out. However, before he could touch the death sandstorm, his divine sense was already shattered. One could imagine how terrifying the death sandstorm was. Moreover, Murong Yu was shocked to find that the death sandstorm he saw was only about 100 million miles long. However, in just a few breaths, the death sandstorm had already grown to 110 million miles long. Moreover, it was still expanding rapidly. Whoosh! At the same time, a stream of light shot out from the depths of the ground in front of the death sandstorm, and then turned into a stream of light that tore towards Murong Yu. Sage Ruler. Murong Yu's pupils shrank. The person he saw was obviously a Sage Ruler superpower house. However, that person did not even look at the death sandstorm. The moment he appeared, he fled for his life. One could imagine that he could not withstand the death sandstorm. If a Sage Ruler was like that, what about them? Chapter 1325. Let's go. Murong Yu's expression suddenly changed. With a thought, a huge force rushed out and enveloped Yu Mengqing and the others. Then, he took them into the Hichu Luoshu world. However, the little lowly was the only one who resisted and was not sucked in. Murong Yu frowned slightly. This was not the time to be stubborn. Hence, he grabbed the little lowly's arm and was about to drag her into the Hichu Luoshu. However, just as he was about to enter the Hichu Luoshu, he hesitated. The death sandstorm was too terrifying. After entering the Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu had to immediately teleport out of the death desert. Otherwise, he might not be able to withstand the death sandstorm. Moreover, even if he could withstand the death sandstorm, Sha Bo would not be killed. However, who knew where the death sandstorm would send him? If he wanted to teleport out, he would have to leave the death desert. He would have to come back in the future. However, what if he encountered the death sandstorm again? One must know that the death sandstorm was the most common thing in the death desert. In just a moment, Murong Yu made up his mind. After throwing the little lowly into the Hichu Luoshu, he used his speed and shot to the side. The death sandstorm was sweeping in his direction. If he went back the way he came, he would definitely be caught up by the death sandstorm. Hence, if he wanted to leave the range of the death sandstorm, he would have to think of a way from the side. Angelic wings. Teleport. Murong Yu raised his strength and speed to the limit and shot into the distance. At this moment, the holy ruler that Murong Yu saw earlier had already flown close to Murong Yu. When he saw that Murong Yu did not go back the way he came but flew to the side, he could not help but be stunned. Then, his face turned red as he turned around and shot toward Murong Yu's direction. In just a moment, he had already passed by Murong Yu and quickly disappeared into the horizon. And Murong Yu was only eating the dust behind this holy king. Even if Murong Yu went all out, his speed was not even 1% of a Saint King's. However, Murong Yu was not discouraged. After all, there was a gap of 5 major realms between them. Moreover, he was confident that as long as he reached the Saint King realm, his speed would be several times, or even dozens of times faster than the Saint King. By the time the Holy King disappeared from Murong Yu's sight, the death sandstorm had already closed in on Murong Yu. Moreover, the death sandstorm had expanded from 100 million kilometers to 200 million kilometers. Furthermore, it was expanding by over 1 million kilometers in every single instant. Waves of incomparably terrifying power swept over from the direction of the death sandstorm like a storm, causing Murong Yu's hair to stand on end. In fact, even his speed was affected because of this. While flying, Murong Yu split a strand of his divine sense to look behind him. Wherever the death sandstorm passed, everything was razed to the ground. Even the void was torn apart by the impact. The distance between the two was shrinking rapidly. Is leaving the desert of death the only way? Murong Yu roared in his heart, unwilling to accept this outcome. All right, little lowly. Murong Yu had a flash of inspiration as he recalled Murong Yu's ability to travel through the void. Once the two of them combined their powers, their speed would increase by dozens of times. At this moment, the little lowly was sulking in He-Tu and Luo's shoe. She had an unhappy look on her face. Although she could travel through the void, she could not leave the He-Tu Luo shoe without Murong-Yu's permission. Little Lowly could not compare to Little Z in this aspect. Suddenly, a large hand appeared out of thin air above the space where Little Lowly and the others were. Then, before Little Lowly and the others could react, this large hand had already grabbed Little Lowly and dragged her out of the He-Tu Luo shoe. Yu Mengqing and the others exclaimed, but then they received Murong-Yu's voice transmission and felt relieved. "Big Baddie, you're finally willing to let me out?" After coming out, Little Lowly said with a smile like a flower. She was not surprised by Murong-Yu's large hand at all, because until now, only Murong-Yu could directly grab her. If it was anyone else, not to mention grabbing Little Lowly, they couldn't even get close to her. "Use all your strength to quickly leave this place with the two of us." Murong-Yu's voice sounded in Little Lowly's ears. At this moment, Little Lowly realized that the death sandstorm that was 400 to 500 million miles long was tearing through the void of the Death Desert and was extremely close to them. It was almost burning their buttocks. Little Lowly rolled her eyes, but she was too lazy to look down on Murong-Yu. She immediately increased her strength to the limit. In the next moment, the two incomparably huge spatial powers quickly merged together. With a swoosh, the speed of the two soared by dozens of times and quickly left the place. However, although Murong-Yu and Little Lowly's speed soared by dozens of times, the speed of the death sandstorm behind them was also increasing. Every time it grew, the speed of the death sandstorm would soar by a few times. In the end, the distance between Murong-Yu and the death sandstorm did not increase. Instead, it became smaller and smaller. After a few days, Little Lowly's spirit was dispirited. In the past few days, both her and Murong-Yu's strength and spirit were in a state of overload. If Little Lowly did not have a large number of divine elixir pills to replenish her strength at any time, she would have run out of ammunition and food. However, even so, her spirit was exhausted. Murong-Yu was still in a state of full spirit because of the life force and the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life could directly absorb the chaotic energy to replenish the energy he consumed. Meanwhile, the life force was constantly cleansing Murong-Yu's body, mind, and soul, making his fatigue disappear quickly. At this time, the death sandstorm had grown to the size of trillions of miles. However, Murong-Yu and Little Lowly's frantic running these past few days was not in vain. They had arrived at the edge of the death sandstorm. However, because the edge was growing larger and larger, they were still unable to escape the range of the death sandstorm. However, because they were at the edge, the death sandstorm was not that terrifying. If they were at the center, even an ancestral sage would be easily killed. "I can't hold on any longer." Little Lowly's tired voice sounded in Murong-Yu's ears. "Then let's enter the He-Tu Luo Shu world." Murong-Yu felt a little helpless. After running for so many days, were they finally going to enter the He-Tu Luo Shu? However, if Little Lowly could not hold on, he would not be able to escape with his own speed. Hey, the death sandstorm seems to be fading. Just as Murong-Yu was about to enter the He-Tu Luo Shu to teleport away from the death sandstorm, Little Lowly's surprised voice sounded in his ears. Immediately, Murong-Yu looked over. Then, he saw the edge of the death desert begin to rapidly collapse. Then, as if the world was collapsing, the death sandstorm that had been chasing them for several days was quickly annihilated in their line of sight. In less than a few dozen breaths, the death sandstorm that was trillions of miles long disappeared without a trace. The sky once again regained its clarity. However, the death desert was still a stretch of yellow sand. All of this happened suddenly, and it disappeared even more suddenly. Even Murong-Yu found it hard to comprehend. Slap. While Murong-Yu was shocked, Little Lowly ruthlessly slapped the back of his head. When Murong-Yu turned his head to look at Little Lowly asked curiously, "Does it hurt?" "It hurts." Murong-Yu gritted his teeth. In any case, he was the sect master of the Shingzhen world. Being slapped like this was not in line with his identity. Little Loli suddenly jumped up. So I wasn't hallucinating. This is real. The Death Desert has really disappeared. As she spoke, little Loli clapped her hands and cheered. However, Morong Yu's face darkened and he flew into a rage. He grabbed the little Loli and pressed her against his thigh. Then he raised his right hand and spanked her little butt. Pa! 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 Io, it hurts. Big bad guy, you dare to hit me, you're dead. Little Loli cried out in pain. She gritted her teeth and cursed Morong Yu. However, Morong Yu didn't stop there. He was determined to teach this little Loli a lesson today. This was too much. However, after a while, he heard little Loli's cries of pain seem to have changed. Therefore, he stopped and looked at little Loli, wanting to see what was going on. However, when he saw little Loli, his expression changed drastically. The little Loli's face was tender and rosy to begin with. At this moment, she looked like a ripe apple. Her pair of big eyes were watery and filled with a misty look. Morong Yu was very familiar with little Loli's expression. In the past, when he had sex with Zhao, Jiqing, and the rest, they would all look like this when they were aroused. In other words, little Loli actually made a move at this moment. She was aroused by him spanking her, but Morong Yu's heart flashed with a strong sense of guilt. He quickly let go of little Loli. You've used up too much energy these few days. Quickly recover. After saying that, he left as if he was escaping. The little Loli cast a coquettish glance at Morong Yu, but she quickly regained her senses. Therefore, she began to use her power to suppress all these emotions and began to recover her strength and mind. Not long after, seeing that little Loli had recovered, Morong Yu let Situ Xian and the rest out. Phew! Have we finally escaped the death sandstorm? Are we finally safe? The girls breathed a sigh of relief. Although they were all in the Hichu, Luoshu world and could not see anything outside, they were always on tenterhooks. Morong Yu nodded and then looked at one. Where is this in the Death Desert? How long is it before we reach that place? When he shook his head blankly. These few days, Morong Yu and Situ Xian had been flying and did not know how far away they were from their original path. Moreover, the Death Desert was endless yellow sand, and there was no reference at all. It was basically impossible to determine the direction here. Chapter 1326. Because of the Heaven Fire City, the Sky Slaughter Sect, and the Broken Star Sect's kill order, as well as the attraction of the treasures on Morong Yu's body, countless people chased after Morong Yu and the others into the Desert of Death. When Morong Yu encountered the Desert of Death, some unlucky people inevitably encountered the same death sandstorm. These people were not as fast as Morong Yu. In a short period of time, countless experts were torn apart by the death sandstorm and suffered heavy losses. Among them, there were even super experts in the ancient sage realm. However, none of the experts in the King Sage realm died. Experts of this level were too fast. The death sandstorm that Morong Yu encountered was only an ordinary sandstorm and did not pose any threat to them. However, because of the death sandstorm, they had long lost their target, Morong Yu. The Desert of Death was extremely vast. If they wanted to meet Morong Yu again, they could only rely on luck. If that's the case, we can only search slowly. Morong Yu was a little helpless. He could not leave the Desert of Death first and then re-enter, right? He had been running for several days because he did not want to leave the Desert of Death. At this time, little Loli had recovered to her peak and walked over slowly. However, perhaps because of the guilt in his heart, Morong Yu felt that little Loli's eyes were a little strange when she looked at him. She's just a child. She doesn't know anything. Calm down. Calm down. Morong Yu shouted in his heart, trying hard to return to normal. However, just as they were about to leave, Morong Yu's face suddenly darkened. Originally, he was still bright and sunny, but now he was so gloomy that it seemed like water was about to drip out. This abnormality was immediately noticed by the women. Husband, what's wrong? Situ Xian walked up and asked with concern. Just now, little Xian and the others all ascended. Morong Yu said in a low voice. His face became more and more gloomy. They've all ascended? Hearing this, all the girls exclaimed in surprise. Their faces were as gloomy as Murong Yu's. Murong Xian, Murong Yi, Murong Lin, Murong Yin, Gu Xiaoyang, Su Hegi, Little Purple, Fiery-Eyed Golden Ape, Big Black Dog, and Murong Yu's disciple Gu Kai had all ascended. Murong Yu was the overlord of the divine world. He controlled the entire divine world. Although he wouldn't be observing the God realm all the time right now, he was still in the God realm. However, as long as something big happened in the God realm, he would be the first to know. Moreover, Murong Xian and the others were people that Murong Yu paid close attention to. Before this, he had repeatedly reminded them not to ascend for the time being. Because of Murong Yu, the humans and demons in the sky hated him to the core. Apart from these two races, the sacred race also didn't treat the human race well. With their strength, once they ascended, it would definitely be a disaster. Once their identities were exposed, they might be killed immediately. Or he could capture them and use them to threaten Murong Yu. Originally, Murong Yu wanted to let them ascend after finding a place to stay in the sacred world. But now, Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. In his heart, he was extremely furious. Different from Murong Yu, Yu Mengxing and the others were only filled with worry. Especially after their experiences these few days, they had a deeper understanding of the dangers of the sacred world. The more they understood this dangerous world, the more worried they were. Forget it, the children and grandchildren have their own fortune. They won't really grow up under my wings all day long. It's time for them to go out and explore. After a long time, Murong Yu exhaled, and his expression returned to normal. Let it go just like that? Why don't we go look for them? Yu Mengxing looked worried. The other women also looked at Murong Yu with hopeful eyes. They had the same thoughts as Yu Mengxing. Murong Yu shook his head. It's not that I don't want to look for them. It's just that the sacred world is so big, we don't know where they ascended to. Moreover, every ascender was random. If we want to look for them, we need to be strong. Thinking about it, it seemed like Murong Yu's words made sense. The sacred world was so big. Looking for a few people was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It depended on luck. But if they were strong enough, as long as they called for help, they wouldn't even need to do anything. There would naturally be people serving them. Thus, everyone gathered their thoughts and continued on their way. However, the women might not be as open-minded as Murong Yu. They were much quieter along the way. The little lowly who was chattering nonstop also seemed to have a change in personality. She actually didn't make a sound. The weather in the Death Desert became hotter. The speed of the women slowed down. They were sweating, thirsty, and other situations constantly appeared on their bodies. There's actually an oasis in front. Suddenly, Murong Yu's face was filled with astonishment as he spoke. Everyone looked at Murong Yu in a daze, because their divine senses were far inferior to Murong Yu's. But soon, the oasis appeared in their sight. It was an oasis with a radius of hundreds of miles. It was filled with green plants, and there were even lakes. The scenery was beautiful. Is this an illusion? Gong Sun Ning, you said in a daze. Everyone quickly nodded. After all, the Death Desert was too terrifying. There was actually an oasis in it. It was simply too unbelievable. This isn't an illusion. These oases do exist, and there are quite a few of them. Moreover, the oases won't be affected by the Death Desert. Whether it's the Death Sandstorm or the other beasts in the Death Desert, they won't enter the oases. This oasis is just a small oasis. I've seen an oasis with a radius of tens of millions of miles. It's just like a continent. When he looked and then explained. So magical? Murong Yu and the others were curious. However, they hadn't encountered any of the beasts in the Death Desert. They didn't know what kind of beasts they were. But looking at Wen Yi's pale face, those beasts must be very terrifying. Wen Yi nodded and looked at the oasis in the distance. His face suddenly became excited. Murong Yu, I think we're almost there. It's not far from the oasis, and it seems like we've come at the right time. When he looked at Murong Yu and said excitedly, Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat, and his face showed a touch of joy. What do you mean? Do you know why the Death Desert is called the Death Desert? Other than the extremely terrifying death sandstorm and the harsh environment, the various beasts in the Death Desert also play an important role. You might find it strange because we haven't seen any beasts after entering the Death Desert. That's because all the beasts ran to that place. Rumble, before when Yi's voice died down, a loud sound like 10,000 horses galloping came from the front. Then, Murong Yu and the others saw a cloud of yellow sand rising up into the sky. Instantly, their faces changed. Was it another death sandstorm? An extremely powerful aura swept over and suppressed everyone, and even their souls seemed to be trembling. But this terrifying aura was different from the death sandstorm. The death sandstorm's aura was powerful, shocking, and suppressing people to the point that they couldn't resist. But this aura was filled with violence, brutality, and blood. It was two completely different things. Oh no, it's a beast tide. When Yi's face suddenly changed. Just as Murong Yu and the others were about to ask a question, the flood had already appeared in front of them. It was a variety of beasts that emitted an extremely violent aura. In the sky and on the ground, there were countless ferocious beasts. There were huge beasts that were thousands or even tens of thousands of miles long. There were also beasts that were pocket-sized, but these beasts all emitted a powerful aura. And they were all beasts that Murong Yu and the others had never seen before. Now, these countless ferocious beasts had gathered together, forming a torrent of ferocious beasts. It was vast and mighty, and it was extremely visually impactful. This was a beast tide. When Murong Yu was in the immortal realm, he had seen the scene of billions of immortals fighting. But compared to the beast tide, it paled in comparison. Let's hurry to that oasis. Otherwise, we'll be torn apart by the beast tide. When Yi's face was ugly as he said fearfully, this beast tide was so terrifying that even a Saint King realm cultivator could be torn apart. Go! Immediately, Murong Yu and the others rose into the air and shot toward the oasis. During this process, Murong Yu and the others saw streaks of light tear through the sky of the Death Desert and rush toward the oasis. Hurry up, we won't be able to make it. Murong Yu was a little anxious. In the end, he directly put Yu Mengqing and the others into the Hichu Luo Shu. The next moment, he unfolded his angelic wings, raised his speed to the limit, and shot out quickly. Rumble! A series of footsteps rushed over, shaking the entire Death Desert. The sound was earth-shattering and extremely terrifying. While Murong Yu was shooting toward the oasis, the beast tide in front of them had already approached the other side of the oasis. However, the strange thing was that when the beasts encountered the oasis, they consciously took a detour around it. They didn't even fly over the oasis. It was as if there was something in the oasis that they were afraid of. An extremely powerful aura swept over, causing Murong Yu's body to sway a little. His speed was less than a tenth of his usual speed, but he was getting closer to the oasis. Ha ha! At this moment, a burst of loud laughter suddenly came from the oasis. Then, an extremely huge fist tore through the void, and without any warning, viciously smashed toward Murong Yu. Chapter 13:27. At this time, Murong Yu and the beast tide had already arrived at the edge of the oasis. The terrifying aura that erupted from the beast tide even blasted Murong Yu's body, which had reached the level of a low-grade sacred tool. One could imagine how terrifying the power of the beast tide was. In the oasis, the timing of the attack was perfect, right when Murong Yu was about to enter the oasis. At this time, once Murong Yu was sent flying, he would rush into the beast tide and be torn to pieces by the endless fierce beasts. It could be seen how vicious the attacker was. In a hurry, Murong Yu looked at the high-level, undying saint who attacked, but he found that he had no impression of him at all. Since he didn't know him, why did he attack? Then there was only one possibility. That guy killed for fun and wanted to see Murong Yu torn apart by the beast tide. At this moment, Murong Yu's heart burst with his soaring, killing intent. However, the high-level, undying saint who attacked had a look of disdain on his face. In his opinion, Even if Murong could dodge his punch, he would still be devoured by the beast tide. Taking a step back, even if Murong had dodged his attack, he had also avoided the fate of being torn apart by the beast tide. However, he was just a 9th level great saint. So what if he killed him? Could he do anything to him? Unfortunately, Murong disappointed the high-level undying saint. If he was just an ordinary great saint, he would definitely not be able to dodge this attack. But now, he just swayed his body, avoided the attack of the undying saint, and landed on the oasis. The moment he entered the oasis, the beast tide outside rushed over like a stormy wave. The momentum shook the sky and was extremely terrifying. After stepping on the ground, Murong looked coldly at the undying saint who attacked him, and slowly approached him with murderous intent. The high-level undying saint was just stunned, and then he smiled coldly. Looking at Murong who was slowly walking over, his eyes were full of disdain. "Why are you attacking me?" Murong came in front of this person and shouted coldly. The high-level undead realm expert smiled faintly. "Do I need a reason to kill you? All right, since you insist on a reason, then it's because I don't like you." "Ha ha ha." Murong smiled and looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. "Let me tell you something. Actually, I don't like you either. So you could die now." Before he could finish his sentence, Murong's big hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the other party. The sneer on the high-level undying realm saint's face deepened. However, his attack was not slow either. He threw a punch at Murong. "Little bastard, you actually dared to attack me? You must be tired of living." The high-level undying stage saint laughed sinisterly as his fist suddenly accelerated towards Murong. Bang! In the blink of an eye, their fists fiercely collided. Suddenly, the high-level undying saint's expression changed drastically. This was because the scene he wanted to see of Murong's fist being shattered by his own fist did not appear. His fist was shattered, but it was not Murong's fist, but his own. Furthermore, after shattering Murong's fist didn't even pause as it continued to press forward bravely. The high-level undying saint's arm was directly shattered. It was not until Murong's punch blew up half of his body that he reacted. How can a 9th level great saint have such powerful strength? "I'm a 9th level undying saint." At this moment, the high-level undying saint was stunned. Idiot! Being absent-minded during a battle was simply courting death. Murong sneered, flipped his big hand, and directly grabbed the opponent's head. Then, he lifted the man up with one hand. The next moment, an incomparably huge force spurted out from his palm. Suddenly, the young man was blasted straight out of the oasis like a kite with a broken string. You can't kill." When he was thrown out by Murong, the high-level undying saint finally reacted. He wanted to struggle, but all his strength was sealed by Murong. So, with a swoosh, he rushed into the beast tide outside. The moment he entered the beast tide, the strength in his body recovered. Therefore, the high-level undying saint was overjoyed and was about to rush into the oasis. But, rumble, Murong could only see a sky full of ferocious beasts. He couldn't see which ferocious beast had killed the high-level undying saint. Even his soul was annihilated. What a terrifying beast tide. Looking at the vast beast tide outside, Murong sighed. At this time, the other people in the oasis were all pale. They looked at the beast tide outside the oasis for a while, and then looked at Murong for a while. Murong's performance calmed some people, but more people were worried about the beast tide. Although they knew that the beast tide would not attack the oasis, who knew if there would be a mutation? Once the beast tide surged, they would die without a doubt. There was no way to escape. With a thought, everyone in the Hichu Luoshu came out. However, the moment they came out, except for the fearless little lowly, everyone else was so scared that their faces turned pale. Although the oasis isolated a part of the aura from the beast tide, the remaining aura still rushed over like a storm. Everyone in the small oasis felt like they were a lone boat in a stormy sea that could be torn apart at any time. Fierce beasts generally have crystal cores, and these crystal cores contain a huge amount of power. It's best to use them for cultivation, Muronyu suddenly thought as he looked at the beast tide that kept flying past. If he wasn't a soul sage, he would definitely not have this idea, because he couldn't kill these beasts at all. But he had an extremely powerful soul attack. With a thought, his soul pool surged like a volcano. It had to be said that after refining the souls of Bailin and the others, his soul pool had grown a little. But the liquefied soul power didn't increase much. In fact, as the soul pool grew bigger, so did the soul power. But Muronyu was constantly compressing the soul power. This caused the liquefied soul power to become more condensed. Although the number was reduced, the power was much stronger than before. Whoosh! While everyone was trembling in fear as they watched the ferocious beast fly by, Muronyu's soul power had already torn through the void and rushed out of the oasis, locking onto an imperishable stage ferocious beast. Bang! The eternal stage fierce beast didn't even have time to react before its soul was crushed by Muronyu. But what made Muronyu depressed was that, after this ferocious beast was killed, it was smashed into millions of pieces by the ferocious beast surging from behind. Not even the crystal core was left behind. It was so fast that Muronyu didn't even have a chance to attack. You all stay here and don't move. I'll be back soon. After instructing the girls, Muronyu strode to the edge of the small oasis. It was only a few steps away from the outside. Upon seeing Muronyu, the ferocious beasts swept their gazes over and let out deafening roars. They wanted to kill Muronyu, but they didn't dare to do it, because Muronyu didn't leave the small oasis. Soul extermination. Muronyu roared inwardly. His soul pool began to vibrate rapidly as streams of soul energy shot out like a torrent. Instantly, dozens of fierce beasts were enveloped. At the same time, Muronyu's hand reached out. Chi-Chi, the fierce beasts that were enveloped by Muronyu's soul, couldn't resist the attack of a 2-star soul power. Their souls were annihilated. They died in an instant. At the same time that they died, Muronyu's large hand reached out to grab them. Whoosh! Muronyu's speed was extremely fast. In less than an instant, he had already retracted his hand. Then he was pleasantly surprised to find that he had caught more than 10 fierce beasts this time. They were at least eternal stage fierce beasts, and there were even profound sage beasts. A brilliant smile appeared on Muronyu's face. Although the harvest this time wasn't much, if he continued to attack, his harvest would definitely be shocking. I wonder how long the beast tide will last. Muronyu thought to himself. At the same time, he dug out the crystal cores of the fierce beasts. Seeing this, the other people in the small oasis looked at Muronyu in shock. Everyone had an incredulous look on their faces. Muronyu is only a great sage. How could he kill so many fierce beasts that were so much stronger than him? There were even some people who were ready to make a move. But reality told them that they weren't Muronyu. Those who attacked were surprised to find that their attacks were crushed before they could even hit the ferocious beast. Muronyu didn't pay attention to those who followed him. He stood at the edge of the small oasis and kept attacking. 20, 30, 50. Muronyu killed more and more fierce beasts. In less than an hour, Muronyu had harvested at least hundreds of fierce beasts. Suddenly, the people in the small oasis looked at Muronyu with different eyes. Some were shocked, some were greedy, and some were disdainful. Suddenly, Muronyu stopped. It's too wasteful to kill their souls directly. I have to find a way to swallow their souls. A man who was never content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Have you finally stopped? He is not invincible. His power will eventually be exhausted. Seeing Muronyu stop, the people in the small oasis couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Many of them had higher realms than Muronyu, but they couldn't compare to Muronyu. But before they finished sighing, Muronyu stretched out his big hand again. Suddenly, those people's faces froze. Chapter 1328. The beast tide lasted for half a month and still hadn't subsided. In the small oasis where Muronyu was, everyone except for Muronyu could only look at the beast tide in fear. They didn't gain anything. Occasionally, Their greedy gazes would sweep past Murong Yu's body. Murong Yu was the only one who had gained anything. Moreover, his harvest was extraordinarily great. Half a month ago, Murong Yu had started killing the savage beasts that passed by. After half a month, the number of vicious beasts that he had killed and captured had reached hundreds of thousands. In other words, Murong Yu had at least hundreds of thousands of imperishable stage savage beast crystal cores. If he were in a place like White Sun City, his wealth would be enough to kill any family. In fact, this wasn't Murong Yu's biggest gain. After all, although there were many crystal cores, Murong Yu didn't have the time to refine them. Therefore, he was still at the peak of the 9th level of the Great Saint Realm. However, his battle prowess had increased by several folds, because his soul pool had more than doubled in size. Although he could only obtain less than 10% of the savage bee souls after killing them, how terrifying was 10% of the souls of hundreds of thousands of savage beasts. Moreover, these savage beasts were at least in the imperishable stage. Just 10% of the souls was probably more than 10 times the size of Murong Yu's soul pool. However, after refining them, Murong Yu's soul pool had only doubled in size. This was because Murong Yu had purified the souls of the savage beasts. Moreover, while refining, Murong Yu continued to condense them. Right now, his soul pool was more than 10 times more condensed than before he entered the small oasis. In other words, Murong Yu's soul pool was at least 10 times stronger than before. 2 stars, 2 levels of heaven. This was the current level of his soul pool. As his soul pool grew stronger, the speed at which he killed the savage beasts increased. The more savage beasts he killed, the more souls he could refine, and then his soul pool would become stronger. If this cycle continued, it wouldn't be a problem for his soul pool to reach 3 stars. However, while refining his soul pool, Murong Yu also felt quite helpless. If he wanted to improve his cultivation pool, he needed to refine hundreds or even thousands of times more power than ordinary people. And it wasn't only in terms of cultivation pool, but also in terms of soul pool. Because during this process, he also gave a part of his soul to Gongsun Ningyu to be refined. The amount of soul energy Gongsun Ningyu had refined wasn't even 1/10 of Murong Yu's. However, her soul had already broken through from the level of 1 star to the 5th layer of 2 stars. She Murong Yu's soul pool. On the other hand, Murong Yu had refined 10 times more soul power than him, yet he had only managed to raise his cultivation by a small realm. 10 times the soul pool's soul pool. In other words, Murong Yu's soul pool was at least 100 times more than Gongsun Ningyu's. However, Murong Yu's soul pool was more difficult to improve, but Gongsun Ningyu couldn't compare to the amount of soul pool he absorbed. Even if Gongsun Ningyu's soul pool was 3 levels higher than Murong Yu's, her attack power was far inferior to Murong Yu's. It wasn't even 1/10 of Murong Yu's. Murong Yu had a feeling that his soul pool was absolutely invincible among those of the same level. Unless the opponent's soul pool reached 3 stars, it was impossible to be his opponent. It was precisely because of this that Murong Yu didn't get tired of cultivating his soul pool. Otherwise, he would have given up long ago. After all, it was better to focus on improving his cultivation pool than to multitask. It even seemed that his physical body needed to be improved. Time continued to pass, and the beast tide continued. However, the savage beasts passing by were getting stronger and stronger. At this time, even undead stage savage beasts were rarely seen. Most of them were profound sage and ancient sage realm savage beasts, but there were also many Saint King realm savage beasts. Occasionally, there would even be an ancestor sage-level savage beast flying by. Even if the supreme pressure of an ancestor sage-level super powerhouse couldn't completely penetrate into the small oasis, it still suppressed everyone in the small oasis. Their physical body and soul pool were almost crushed. However, Yu Mengqing and the others had all entered the Hichu Luoshu world to cultivate. Only Murong Yu was working diligently. After nearly a month of refining crystal cores to improve their cultivation pool, and under the effect of time acceleration, the strength of the girls was rapidly improving. From the original First Order Sage, they quickly rose to the peak of the Ninth Order Sage, and even broke through to the Great Sage realm one after another. In the Holy World, they broke through to the Great Sage realm in a month. This speed was even faster than Murong-Yu's. This made Murong-Yu a little puzzled. This was when a man achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs will also ascend to heaven. As long as one of Murong-Yu's people became stronger, then the others would have a lot of resources to cultivate. As long as there were enough resources, even a pig's cultivation pool could be quickly accumulated. What's more, Mu Liyue and the others' aptitudes weren't bad and could even be considered geniuses. Wan Yi's cultivation pool had finally recovered and even broke through, reaching the peak of the Ninth Order Undead realm. This should have been something worth celebrating. However, after seeing Murong-Yu's strength, when he couldn't feel happy at all. Following Murong-Yu's side, there were many benefits, but one also had to be prepared to be attacked at any time. Although Murong-Yu never intended to attack anyone. However, every single aspect of him was indeed a huge blow to others. Sometimes, when he even sympathized with Yu Mengqing and the others. Living with Murong-Yu, wouldn't it be a big blow to them? For a month, the rest of the people in the small oasis were on tenterhooks and were scared half to death. Only Murong-Yu and the others' cultivation pool continued to improve. If those people knew that Yu Mengqing and the others had improved by a large cultivation pool in just a month, would they go crazy and kill them? 3 months. The beast tide lasted for 3 months before it finally subsided. As for Murong-Yu, the number of crystal cores he had obtained had reached a whopping 2 million. This was because the beasts in the last 2 months were getting stronger and stronger, and Murong-Yu found it difficult to kill them. Otherwise, with the strength of the first month, Murong-Yu's current strength, killing more than 10 million beasts was not a problem at all. However, although the crystal cores he obtained decreased sharply, in terms of quality, they were incomparable to the beasts he had killed before. And after 3 months of continuous refining and using soul power to attack, Murong-Yu's soul power had reached the peak of the second star fifth firmament. Although he had only improved by 4 small cultivation tiers in 3 months, his soul power's attack power was now dozens of times stronger than the second star first firmament. In the Holy World, the strength of each small cultivation tier would be 10 times stronger than the previous cultivation tier. But the reality was not so. It was true that the strength of each cultivation tier would skyrocket, but the increase was absolutely not that terrifying. For example, if the strength of the first level Great Sage was 1, then at the second level, the increase would be 10 times, reaching 10 times. Then at the third level, would it break through 10 times? Reach 100? Or 100 times of the first level Great Sage. And at the fourth level, it would reach 1,000 times of the first level. In this way, the difference between cultivation tiers was at least 100 million times. No matter how strong Murong-Yu was, could he kill a powerhouse that was 100 million times stronger than him? That was impossible. Therefore, the actual situation was that every cultivation tier was compared to the cultivation tier of the first level. The second level was 10 times stronger than the first level, and the third level was 20 times stronger. In other words, every cultivation tier, the strength would double. And if it was a cultivation tier, it would be 100 times stronger. For example, the strength of a first level Great Sage was at least 100 times stronger than a 9th level Great Sage. And the difference between a saint and an undead realm powerhouse was at least 10,000 times stronger. This was why there were very few people in the Holy World who could fight across cultivation tiers, especially across cultivation tiers. Murong-Yu's strength and physical body combined could only allow him to fight across cultivation tiers. He could not fight across cultivation tiers. And if it was combined with soul attacks, he could fight across cultivation tiers. This was because of the uniqueness of soul power. Soul attacks are at least 50 times stronger than before entering the small oasis. Now, I can easily kill a high-level undead realm saint, right? It's a pity that my cultivation and physical body did not improve. Murong-Yu thought in his heart. Before entering the Death Desert, Even Bai Lin, who was only at the first level undead realm, could block his soul attacks. But now, if he let them fight again, Murongyu did not need to use other means at all. His soul power could directly attack and destroy the other party's soul easily. If his thoughts were known by others, even if they knew that they were no match for him, they would definitely kill him and beat him up. The beast tide has finally dissipated. Now it's time to find that place. Murongyu had an idea and was about to release everyone from the Hichu Luo Shu. But before he could move, he felt that the atmosphere in the void was a little strange. So he turned his head and looked behind him. Immediately, he saw dozens of people slowly closing in on him with malicious intentions. Murongyu only glanced at them and sneered in his heart. They were all looking at Murongyu with greedy eyes. It was obvious that now that the beast tide had retreated, they wanted to snatch Murongyu's crystal cores. After all, those were about 2 million high-grade crystal cores. If they were to refine them, it would not be a problem for them to advance by 1 or 2 cultivation tiers. Kid, I don't want to think too much. Hand over all the crystal cores you have, and maybe we'll spare your life. Otherwise, you're on your own. A young man with a scar on his face slowly approached, his face full of greed. As he spoke, the centipede-like scar on his face began to move ferociously, making him look extremely terrifying. Chapter 1329. Murongyu looked at everyone with a smile on his face. While Scarface was speaking, he was also looking at him with a smile. Scarface wasn't very strong. He was only a low-level undead realm expert and wasn't much of a threat to Murongyu. In fact, there weren't many people present who could pose an absolute threat to Murongyu. There were a few undead realm experts, but there were quite a few undead realm experts. There were more than 100 of them. There were even several profound sages among them. Before entering the small oasis, Murongyu would have definitely fled without a trace if he didn't have the heavenly mist broken finger. But now, his strength had skyrocketed, and his soul had reached the second star 5th heavenly layer. With such strength, he wasn't afraid even when facing profound sage realm experts. Hand it over. Seeing that Murongyu didn't say anything, he smiled confidently and said, "Hand it over." Scarface couldn't help but be furious. Although Murongyu could kill undead realm experts, he couldn't hide the fact that he was still a great sage. Thus, the enraged Scarface took a step forward and suddenly appeared in front of Murongyu. Then, he ruthlessly clawed at Murongyu's head. The claw was fierce, and the sky was filled with claw shadows. In an instant, Murongyu's whole body was wrapped up. A terrifying pressure crazily strangled Murongyu. Murongyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Scarface didn't just want to take him down, he wanted to kill him. Therefore, the killing intent in his heart was ignited at this moment. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk the soul pool, which had a radius of 200 miles, erupted like a volcano. Extremely condensed soul power shot out from between his eyebrows and intertwined into a huge net in the void. It rushed into Scarface's soul space and then quickly strangled Scarface's soul. When Murongyu's soul power entered Scarface's soul space, Scarface's hand was only halfway there. It was still a long way from Murongyu's head. His speed was fast, but it was far from the speed of soul power. However, when Murongyu's soul force entered Scarface's soul space, Scarface immediately reacted. In that instant, Murongyu's face abruptly changed. The energy in his body surged into his spiritual space like a torrential flood, intending to destroy Murongyu's spiritual force. At the same time, the speed of his outstretched hand naturally slowed down. He knew that as long as he killed Murongyu's soul power would immediately dissipate. But he also knew that his speed was far inferior to Murongyu's soul attack. Maybe he could kill Murongyu, but before Murongyu died, his soul would be torn apart. After weighing the pros and cons, Scarface decided to protect his soul first. If it was before entering the small oasis, Scarface quickly defended himself. Maybe he could really block Murongyu's soul attack. But now Murong Yu's soul attack was nearly 50 times stronger than before. What kind of concept was 50 times? Originally, Green could completely block Murong Yu's soul attack. He needed Murong Yu to use God's descent to affect Scarface's mind. In the moment when Scarface was distracted, Murong Yu had the opportunity to rush out through the cracks in his power. But now, not to mention Green, even Scarface's power, who was a small level higher than Green, was completely unable to block Murong Yu's soul power. Rip, the sound of cloth tearing came from Scarface's soul space. Scarface's power was immediately torn apart, and Murong Yu's soul power was like a stormy sea, directly rushing through the tearing power and enveloping Scarface's soul in a flash. Scarface's soul was like a prehistoric ominous beast, swallowing it in one gulp. Scarface only had time to issue an earth-shattering scream, and then his whole body suddenly fell backwards, no longer having any aura of life. His soul had been swallowed by Murong Yu. How could there be any life left? Seeing this, the surrounding people were shocked, and one by one, they looked at Murong Yu with shocked eyes. Some of them were so scared that they involuntarily retreated a few steps. All this happened too quickly. From Scarface's attack to his death, not even a moment had passed. It was so short that everyone didn't know what was going on. You have the same plan as him? You want me to hand over the crystal nucleus? After killing Scarface, Murong Yu's gaze slowly swept over everyone's faces. Meeting Murong Yu's gaze, those undead powerhouses quickly retreated. Even some of the undead powerhouses retreated a few steps without leaving a trace. Only the few high-level imperishable realm and profound sage realm super powerhouses remained where they were, looking at Murong Yu with indifferent expressions. Boy, your strength is beyond my expectations. But if you think that you are invincible, you are gravely mistaken. Hand over the crystal nucleus, and I will let you live. A profound sage stepped forward, looking at Murong Yu indifferently. It was as if he wasn't looking at a person, but a corpse. Murong Yu looked at the other party indifferently and suddenly said, "You are a profound sage?" The profound sage nodded. "You just came from the desert of death?" Murong Yu asked another unrelated question. The profound sage was a little impatient, but he still nodded. But the cold light in his eyes was bursting with killing intent. Seeing the other party nod, Murong Yu suddenly smiled, and then his gaze slowly swept over everyone in the small oasis. "You also came from the outside not long ago." No one answered, and they all looked at Murong Yu with puzzled eyes. Murong Yu still had a calm smile on his face. "Since you all came from the outside, you must know what this is, right?" While speaking, Murong Yu's big hand made a grabbing motion. In the next moment, a somewhat huge severed finger appeared in his hand. When they saw the severed finger, the pupils of many people shrank, and they all showed hesitation on their faces. It seems that most of you recognize what this severed finger is. You're probably still doubtful, right? Yes, I am Murong Yu, although I don't know if you came to kill me. But whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Before Murong Yu finished speaking, many figures in the small oasis had already soared into the sky, turning into streams of light that tore through the void of the desert of death and fled into the distance. Among them, there was also the profound sage who had previously threatened Murong Yu. "You guys are really audacious. You actually dared to chase me. Now, all of you will die for me." Seeing those people flee without fighting, Murong Yu almost couldn't help but laugh. But soon, his face turned cold, and with a roar, the severed finger suddenly soared into the sky. Murong Yu relied on this severed finger to easily kill profound sages. Thinking of the rumors about Murong Yu and seeing the severed finger soaring into the sky, the sages who hadn't yet fled panicked. Thus, without needing Murong Yu's reminder, they all spread out their figures and quickly fled towards the desert of death. However, there were still several undead sages who were killed by Murong Yu. When he raised the severed finger, a terrifying soul force had already seeped out of his body and locked onto everyone, tearing them apart. The gap in their souls made these people feel the aura of death. While the strong aura of death shrouded their hearts, they thought that it was the shock of the severed finger. Thinking of the terrifying legend of the severed finger, how could they still dare to stay here? In the blink of an eye, except for the few unlucky undead sages who were killed by Murongyu, everyone else in the small oasis had fled. It's a pity that I wasn't able to kill a single profound sage. Murongyu shook his head and put the storage rings of the scar-faced man and the others into the Hichu Luoshu. But soon, he laughed involuntarily. Although his soul had reached the 5th stage of the 2-star realm, it wasn't very possible for him to kill a high-level undead sage. Unless he made another breakthrough and reached the peak of the 2-star realm, then he shouldn't have any pressure to kill a powerhouse at the peak of the undead stage. Murongyu estimated that if his soul reached the 3rd-star realm, it wouldn't be impossible for him to kill a profound sage. It was precisely because of this that he used the severed finger to scare them away. If he didn't want to scare them away, Murongyu could only do his best to kill a few mid-level undead stage powerhouses and then be chased down again. Murongyu had had enough of being constantly chased down. Of course, using this method to scare those people away also made him feel uncomfortable. But there was no other way, limited by his strength, but he believed that one day, these juniors would be scared out of their wits when they heard his name, let alone try to kill him. Those bastards will probably react soon. I have to leave this place as soon as possible, Murongyu muttered, then soared into the air and shot toward the desert. Sure enough, not long after Murongyu left, a figure shot over from the distance and landed on the small oasis. It was the profound sage who had threatened Murongyu before, but immediately fled. Damn it, he actually ran away. This profound sage's face was filled with anger, and his killing intent was overflowing. After being scared away by Murongyu, he quickly reacted. The severed finger was indeed powerful, but didn't have no power, and he was actually scared away. How could he endure this? If news of this spread out, wouldn't he be laughed at by the world? After reacting, he immediately rushed back. But, whoosh! After this profound sage, the second profound sage shot over from the distance like a meteor. After knowing that Murongyu had fled, this person was somewhat depressed. But when he saw the first profound sage running away, a mocking smile appeared on his face. It was a typical case of the pot calling the kettle black. By the time these people returned to the small oasis, Murongyu was already far away from it. Under Wenyi's lead, they quickly headed towards their destination. Chapter 1330. That's it. Somewhere in the desert of death, Murongyu and the rest looked at the scene in the distance with shock. Above their heads, they were staring at their sacred weapons. The power of the sacred weapons was pushed to the extreme, and rays of light shone down to protect them. As they went deeper into the desert of death, the temperature became higher. A few months ago, Yu Mengqing and the rest could not hold on any longer and took out their sacred weapons. Moreover, they kept going deeper, and even with their sacred weapons, they could barely resist the heat. However, the girls were stubborn. Even so, they did not hide in the Hichu Luoshu. Under such circumstances, it was equivalent to hard training, and the effect was better than ordinary training. Therefore, as time passed, the girls' strength began to increase. Although it was not obvious, they were still getting stronger. Moreover, they became more skilled in controlling the sacred weapons, and it was as if they were controlling their arms. Because of the girls, Muronyu's speed was slowed down. However, Murongyu did not say anything. The improvement of the girl's strength was the most important. Moreover, was he not going to improve his strength? Not far in front of them, there was a huge lake. Yes, there was a huge lake in the desert of death that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the lake, emerald green islands appeared in front of Murongyu and the rest, and they were full of vitality. From afar, Murongyu and the others could even see all kinds of animals and demonic beasts running about on the small islands. Birds chirped and the fragrance of flowers bloomed. It was simply like a paradise. Outside the huge lake was the desert of death that stretched as far as the eye could see, and yellow sand filled the sky. Since the scenery was different, it had a strong visual impact. For a moment, Morong Yu and the rest were shocked. Each of them was amazed by the magic of nature. That cultivation method is on one of the islands in the lake. Seeing the huge lake, when he became excited. Once they entered the lake, it meant that there was no danger. Of course, the so-called danger was relative to the desert of death. Since leaving the small oasis, Morong Yu and the rest went around in the desert of death and encountered more than 10 death storms. Fortunately, his speed wasn't too bad. After discovering the death sandstorm, he immediately fled. Even if the death sandstorm was too strong, Morong Yu and the little lowly would work together to escape. Along the way, there were no mishaps. However, there was one time when they charged into the center of a deadly sandstorm. To be more precise, it was the death sandstorm that suddenly appeared where they were and swept in all directions. At that time, it was really thrilling. Morong Yu's group was almost completely wiped out. Fortunately, Morong Yu reacted quickly and pulled everyone into the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, he teleported back to the small oasis where he had killed the dire beast. Sometimes, Morong Yu's group would even run into the nest of some ferocious beasts, being chased by some powerful beasts. Morong Yu and the others did not encounter many human saints other than the death sandstorm and the ferocious beasts. After all, the desert of death was too big. Moreover, there were not many people who entered the desert of death. It was really not easy to encounter them. After a few times, Morong Yu and the rest got lost in the desert of death again. When they arrived near the huge lake, it had been a year since they entered the desert of death. There are powerful beasts in the lake. We have to be careful. Moreover, the islands in the lake will constantly move. It's not easy to find the island where the cultivation method is among the billions of islands, when he continued to explain. Immediately, Morong Yu's group rose into the air and flew toward the huge lake. This lake is the same as the oasis. The desert's energy can't penetrate it. When the group entered the air above the lake, a refreshing aura hit them in the face. It made them feel refreshed. The environment here was the same as the outside of the holy world. There's a powerful cultivation method in here. Moreover, the environment here is not bad. Why doesn't anyone come here? Kurlan said doubtfully. Morong Yu's face darkened. He looked at Kurlan speechlessly and said, "Do you think ordinary people can easily pass through the desert of death and enter here?" Kurlan could not help but glare at Morong Yu and smile awkwardly. The reason why they could enter here was not only because of Morong Yu and the little lowly speed, but also because of Hichu Luo Shu. If it were not for these two reasons, they would have been torn to pieces by the death sandstorm. How could they have entered here? Moreover, they had only encountered a dozen death sandstorms. They were already extremely lucky. According to Wen Yi, he had encountered hundreds of death sandstorms when he left here the last time. If it were not for Wen Yi's luck, he would not have been captured and imprisoned by the Li family. He would have died in the desert of death. In fact, the reason why they could enter here in a year was not only because of the reasons mentioned above, but also because of Wen Yi. If it were not for this guy who knew the way and led them all the way here, if it were just Morong Yu and the others, they might not be able to enter here, even if they were given another 10,000 years. Splash! As they spoke, the originally calm lake suddenly surged with tens of thousands of waves. Amidst the waves, an incomparably huge octopus-like beast tore through the void and charged towards Morong Yu's group. The 8 of them had 8 claws. One of the claws pierced through the void and quickly clawed at them. What a greedy beast! You want to catch us all in one fell swoop? Morong Yu sneered. The soul pool in his soul space quickly went berserk. His soul power gushed out and was about to attack. However, before his soul power could rush out of his soul space, a black shadow shot out from beside him. Then, Morong Yu saw the shadow of a giant axe appear in the sky and slash down. When Yi's expression changed, he opened his mouth and was about to say, Seeing the giant axe coming, the octopus monster's claw was like a long whip as it lashed out in the void. The sound of cloth tearing could be heard. The octopus monster's claw actually shattered the void, and space fragments fell down. Boom! In a flash, the octopus monster's claw and the little girl's giant axe collided. After the earth-shattering explosion, there was an ear-piercing shriek. At this moment, Wen-Yi finally spoke. "Don't hurt these beasts." However, Wen-Yi's words were too late. This octopus monster was not very powerful. It was only in the eternal stage. After one of its claws was chopped off by the little girl, it let out an earth-shattering roar. The aura on its body surged crazily, and its other 7 claws danced wildly, smashing through the void as it charged fiercely toward the little lowly. The little girl's face was filled with excitement. The giant axe in her hand transformed into millions of axe shadows. She directly collided with the octopus monster and started fighting. The little girl had a powerful background and had all kinds of treasures on her. At this moment, she activated the power of one of the treasures. Rays of light burst out from her body and directly offset the octopus monster's aura. As long as she was not attacked by the octopus monster's aura would have no effect on her. Moreover, even if she was attacked, she would not be hurt. She would only be sent flying. However, the little girl's giant axe ignored the power of the octopus monster. Therefore, in a flash, the little girl's giant axe continuously slashed out and actually chopped off 3 of the octopus monster's remaining 7 claws. The octopus monster's claws did not regenerate. Instead, they kept spewing out black blood with a foul stench. However, the octopus monster became even more furious. Its shrill scream tore through the sky and spread far and wide as if it was going to pierce through the sky. However, Morong-Yu also noticed a phenomenon. After the octopus monster's claws were chopped off, its strength would drop significantly. After 4 of its claws were chopped off, its strength had dropped to the high-level undead stage. It was only about the 8th level of the undead stage. In this way, it was even less of a match for the little girl. Therefore, the little girl showed her invincible power and killed the octopus monster in a few breaths' time. Morong-Yu was about to collect the octopus monster's soul and crystal core when he realized that the originally calm lake had begun to churn. In the distance, there were also extremely violent auras rushing over. They were all heading towards their location. "Run! The beast is coming." When Yi's face changed, Morong-Yu's face also changed slightly. He did not have time to ask what was going on. He waved his hand and directly put the girls into the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, he spread his angelic wings and shot towards the depths of the lake. Roar! 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 Earth-shattering roars came, and at the same time, violent and terrifying auras rushed over, rushing towards Morong-Yu. Morong-Yu even saw the beasts rushing out from the depths of the lake, and then directly began to chase after him. Among them were the octopus monster and other kinds of monsters. "It seems that we have angered everyone." Morong-Yu turned into a stream of light and swept through the void, while his mind sank into the Hichu Luo Shu and asked Wen-Yi, "The beasts here can't be killed because they are very vengeful. Moreover, the beasts are extremely united. Even if they are of different races, they will join forces to hunt down the enemy. We have just killed the octopus monster, so we have offended the beasts in this area." Morong-Yu's heart sank. "Will the beasts in the entire lake chase after us?" "That won't happen. It's just a certain area. As long as we leave their area, they will stop chasing us. However, no one knows how big their area is," Wen-Yi said with a bitter face. Chapter 13:31. Phew, the moment his feet touched the ground, Morong-Yu let out a sigh of relief. On the other hand, the little lowly sat down on the ground and gasped for air. She looked like she was overworked. Indeed, they had almost run out of ammunition and food during their escape. It was the same as when they had encountered the first death sandstorm. Moreover, the death desert was only a natural phenomenon. The vicious beasts that Murong Yu had offended had life and consciousness. A large group of millions of vicious beasts crazily chased after Murong Yu like a torrent. Among them, there was no lack of ancient sage powerhouses. With Murong Yu's speed, it was impossible for him to escape the pursuit of ancient sages. In the end, he once again pulled the little lowly out of the Hichu Luoshu, and combined the strength of the two, they managed to escape from the pursuit of those vicious beasts. In fact, Murong Yu and the little lowly were also unable to escape the pursuit of those vicious beasts. Because those vicious beasts that had reached the profound sage realm and ancient sage realm were roaring at Murong Yu and the little lowly from tens of thousands of kilometers away, but they did not dare to come over. There seemed to be an extremely strict division of areas in this desert lake, and other areas were strictly forbidden from entering the area of other vicious beasts. Fortunately, this was the case, and Murong Yu and the little lowly were able to escape. Otherwise, they would have had to continue running for their lives. Moreover, the vicious beasts that chased after them were only on the periphery of the lake, and their strength was not strong. If there were sage kings, or even ancestor sages, Murong Yu would not have had time to escape. After a long time, when the little lowly recovered, Murong Yu glared at her and said, "Little lowly, don't be so impulsive in the future." The little lowly rolled her eyes, not to be outdone, and looked at Murong Yu. Her look of, "I like you, so what can you do about it?" made Murong Yu gnash his teeth in anger. Moreover, after the incident a few months ago, the little lowly had indeed been silent for a period of time. But very quickly, she returned to her old ways, and often looked down on Murong Yu. Although Murong Yu was furious, he didn't dare to make a move on the little lowly. If something else happened, it would be too embarrassing. After this lesson, for the rest of the journey, Murong Yu and the others didn't attack even when they encountered fierce beasts. Instead, they directly avoided them. If they really couldn't avoid it, then they would all enter the Hichu Luoshu world. Therefore, they were able to avoid a lot of trouble. However, this strange lake caused them to suffer, because these small islands could change at any time. Although Murong Yu had been flying towards the center of the lake, he'd come across several small islands that they'd landed on before. Regarding this, although Murong Yu was curious, he did not have the intention to investigate. After all, these islands had existed for so many years. There were so many experts in the Saints world, but none of them had discovered them. Murong Yu didn't believe that his luck was so good that he was able to discover the mystery behind it. The small island in front is so big. It's like a small continent. There are many powerful auras coming from it, and they are the auras of saints. On this day, while flying, Murong Yu and the others saw an incomparably huge island in front of them. And from the island, there were bursts of auras that shot into the sky. The auras of saints and fierce beasts were very easy to distinguish. Every fierce beast's aura more or less had a trace of brutality and fierceness. This is the small island. There may be many experts cultivating on the island. We have to be careful when we go in. Wen Yi's expression was excited, but he quickly warned everyone, and his gaze especially looked at the little lowly. In fact, they all knew that Wen Yi's words were mostly because of the little lowly. After all, the little lowly was too active. Without saying a word, he swung his axe. The little lowly glared at Wen Yi fiercely, but she was a little depressed. Therefore, everyone increased their speed and rushed into the island. The moment they entered the island, an inexplicable force covered the sky and earth and instantly annihilated Murong Yu. Somehow, Murong Yu felt that the surging force seemed to have a trace of connection with him. While Murong Yu was puzzled, all the cultivation methods that were not circulating in his body automatically started circulating. It was as if there was an invisible hand guiding him to cultivate those cultivation methods. Murong Yu was shocked, and he turned to look at Yu Mengqing and the others, and asked through voice transmission, "Do you feel anything different?" Mu Liyue and the others looked at Murong Yu and shook their heads in confusion. If there was something strange, it would be that there were too many experts on the island, and waves of powerful auras were constantly surging over. Apart from these powerful auras, there was nothing special. Murong Yu frowned slightly, and he calmed down to feel it seriously. But soon, a smile appeared on his face. He even revealed a trace of excitement. After experimenting, he found that there were only 5 cultivation methods that automatically circulated. Army formula, Xi formula, Dough formula, Formation formula, and Ja formula. These 5 cultivation methods were all part of the 9 syllables. Apart from these 5 cultivation methods, there was nothing strange about the other cultivation methods. Murong Yu had encountered a similar situation last time. At that time, he encountered the Ja of the 9 syllables. The current situation was exactly the same as when he encountered the Ja in the Heaven domain. Then, was the cultivation method here also one of the 9 syllables characters? Legend had it that the cultivation method here cultivated the soul. Could it be that one of the characters in the 9 syllables specialized in cultivating the soul? Thinking of this, Murong Yu couldn't help but feel excited, although he didn't feel any soul fluctuations in the air. But even if it wasn't a cultivation method for cultivating the soul, one of the characters in the 9 syllables was more precious and powerful than any other cultivation method. And in the process of his pondering, the 5 characters in the 9 syllables that he practiced were circulating faster and faster, and it seemed that they were about to break away from Murong Yu's control. In fact, Murong Yu could even feel a faint connection from the depths of the island. There seemed to be something waiting for him inside, suppressing the circulation of the cultivation method, and struggling to suppress the tempting idea of sitting cross-legged on the ground to cultivate. Murong Yu led everyone to stride toward the island. Here, they didn't dare to fly, because if they were not careful, they would fly over the heads of some strong people. For some strong people who didn't care about it, it was nothing. But if it attracted some narrow-minded people who couldn't bear to see others flying over their heads, it would be troublesome. As they continued to go deeper, they continued to find strong people. And after those strong people saw Murong Yu and the others, they couldn't help but be surprised, and some of them even looked at Murong Yu and the others. After all, the strongest person in Murong Yu's group was only at the peak of the undead realm, and most of the rest were great sages. Since when could great sages and even undead realm people enter this place? The Desert of Death wasn't an exaggeration. Out of 10,000 people who entered the Desert of Death, not even one would be able to reach this place. Out of 10,000 profound sages, only one would be able to reach this place. This probability was quite high. After all, entering this place not only required great strength, but also luck. If one was unlucky, let alone profound sages, even ancestor sages, or even primal chaos ancestor sages, might not be able to enter this place. They might even die in the Desert of Death, facing the divine senses of powerhouses who were at least in the profound sage realm. Everyone felt uncomfortable at first, but they soon got used to it, because more and more divine senses were scanning them. "We're here." Murong Yu stopped and looked at the huge stone tablet in front of him with a sluggish expression. Does this stone tablet contain the soul cultivation technique? But there's nothing on it? Looking at the smooth stone tablet, Gongsun Ningyu couldn't help but ask. Hearing this, some people who were cultivating near the huge stone tablet shot their gazes over. There were very few profound sages, and most of them were ancient sages or even sage monarchs. According to Gongsun Ningyu, if there was nothing on the stone tablet, then what were they doing here? Could it be that they were all idiots? Even if their lifespans were endless, they wouldn't just sit here and do nothing, right? However, after seeing that Gongsun Ningyu was just a great sage, those gazes were withdrawn. A great person wouldn't hold a grudge against a petty person. Don't talk nonsense. The mystery is on this stone tablet. You can all comprehend it. I'm going to start. Murong Yu glared at Gongsun Ningyu and said to everyone at the same time. However, everyone looked at Murong Yu with suspicious eyes, because they didn't find anything strange about this stone tablet. If you can comprehend anything, you will get great benefits. Murong Yu continued to say, and then sat down cross-legged on the ground. However, Moronu knew that the girls probably wouldn't be able to obtain anything. Everyone was puzzled, but they still sat down cross-legged and extended their divine senses, touching the huge stone tablet. Moronu didn't do so, although he had already determined that the stone tablet must be one of the words of the 9 characters mantra. Moreover, he also wanted to see which word was on the stone tablet, but he had to cultivate first. After coming near the stone tablet, the 5 words of the cultivation fruit revolved even more violently. With Murongyu's strength, he began to be unable to suppress it. Since he couldn't suppress it, he would take advantage of the situation and upgrade these cultivation methods to the next stage. The army character formula was currently cultivated to the 3rd stage, which transformed into angel wings. The 2nd stage of the battle character formula increased combat power by 100 times. The 2nd stage of the Zai character formula gave Moronu the ability to teleport. The 2nd stage of the formation character formula allowed Moronu to read people's minds. Only the Zha character formula was still in the 1st stage. If all these cultivation methods were to be upgraded, just thinking about it made Moronu extremely excited. Chapter 1332. The 5 skills were driven by a word in the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, which he didn't know yet, and they were running crazily. Moronu almost couldn't suppress them anymore. After he let go of the suppression, the 5 techniques began to circulate crazily like a storm. Among them, the Zha formula, which was still in the 1st stage, was running the fastest. The slowest one was the soldier formula, which had reached the 3rd stage. Maybe the Zha formula was about to make a breakthrough. The majority of Murongyu's attention was focused on the Shi character formula. Under his active operation, the speed of the swordsman formula surged even faster. Therefore, the realm of the Zha formula was also improving rapidly. On the 3rd day after Moronu came to the huge stone tablet, Moronyu's body trembled violently. The Zha formula finally made a breakthrough. However, Moronyu's body only trembled for a moment due to the Shi character formula breakthrough. No one noticed anything strange about him, because although the skill had made a breakthrough, his realm didn't increase sharply. As for his strength, checking the memories in his mind, Moronyu was so excited that his body trembled slightly. The 2nd stage of the Zha formula didn't make his strength increase sharply. However, after the breakthrough, Moronyu had some new memories in his mind. The Zha character formula was actually a cultivation method for cultivating the soul. Moronyu was excited and shocked at the same time. Actually, I should have known. In the 1st stage of the Zha formula, I could control other people's souls silently, so I should have guessed it had something to do with the soul. Moronyu thought to himself. There was nothing special about the 2nd stage of the swordsman formula. It only increased the cultivation of the soul. As long as Moronu continued to practice the Zha character formula, his soul would continue to improve. Of course, besides that, Moronu finally got the soul attack skills that he had been dreaming of. Soul Fist, Soul Devouring Cut, and Star Destroying Sky. Moronu roughly looked at it and found that the first 2 moves were single target attacks. As for the last one, Heaven Destroying Stars, it was an AoE attack that was suitable for destroying the souls of others in a group battle. Furthermore, it was different from Moronyu's soul attack. At that time, he had only released his soul to attack the enemy's soul. The more the soul power was dispersed, the less powerful it would be. However, as long as Moronu was strong enough, no matter how many times he split the attack, its power would not weaken. It was even stronger than before. The Soul Tyrant Fist and Soul Devouring Slash were 10 times stronger than Moronyu's usual soul attacks, perhaps even more. After recognizing these 3 battle skills, Moronyu's heart began to stir, and he immediately wanted to cultivate them. But in the end, he suppressed this tempting thought, because at this moment, his soul pool was expanding again. He fully activated the swordsman formula. In the soul space, there seemed to be an invisible hand expanding the soul pool. The soul pool was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than half a day, the soul pool, which was originally 200 miles in radius, had more than doubled in size. It was now 500 miles in radius. However, although the soul pool expanded, the soul power in the soul pool did not increase by much. On the contrary, because of the expansion, the soul pool that was originally overflowing with water was less than half of the soul pool. Regarding this, Morongyu felt it was a pity, but he was not disappointed. As long as he continued to cultivate the swordsman formula or devour other souls, his soul power would soon fill up the entire soul pool. The lack of soul power was not scary. The scary thing was that the soul pool did not expand. If the soul pool did not expand, then the soul power would not increase either, unless he continuously condensed it. But there was a limit to condensing it. It would not continue to condense it. Only when the soul pool continued to expand, the soul power would continue to increase, and Murongyu's soul power would become stronger. After the soul pool expanded, the swordsman formula was still operating, but it was gradually returning to normal. There was no hope for him to break through to the third stage. Leaving a strand of his mind to cultivate the swordsman formula, Morongyu shifted most of his mind to the most powerful swordsman formula, the swordsman formula. The swordsman formula allowed Morongyu to comprehend the rules of space and the power of space. In the second stage, Morongyu was given the ability to teleport. As long as Murongyu's divine sense covered a place, he would be able to teleport there with just a thought. Of course, this was the ideal situation. In fact, teleportation was not so terrifying. But also because of teleportation, Murongyu's strength had increased by several times. He was almost invincible when facing experts of the same or higher level. Of course, if the opponent was too powerful, teleportation would not be of much use. After all, there was a limit to the range of Murongyu's mind. And if the opponent was stronger than him, they could easily find him. I wonder what surprises the third stage of the swordsman formula will bring me. Morongyu pondered, and his mind settled. Time flowed like water, and it continued to flow. A few days later, if anyone noticed Morongyu, they would see that Murongyu's body had begun to turn illusory. They were clearly in the same space, but it did not seem like they were in the same space. And Morongyu was sitting in the lotus position, motionless, but his body seemed to be shuttling through space, and in an instant, he had traversed billions of spaces. Void shuttling. Morongyu was pleasantly surprised. The third stage of the swordsman formula gave Morongyu the ability to travel through space. Void shuttling was different from ordinary flying. For example, Morongyu was in the Yin Huang immortal realm, but he wanted to go to another immortal realm. Then he did not need to use a teleportation design. He could just tear the void and enter another immortal realm. Of course, the prerequisite was that he knew the exact coordinates of the immortal realm. In the immortal realm, Morongyu also had the ability to travel through space. For example, he could directly tear the void and appear outside the Desert of Death and return to White Sun City. Of course, strength determined everything. The stronger he was, the longer Morongyu could tear the void. With his current strength, he might not be able to tear the void and appear outside the Desert of Death. To put it bluntly, void shuttling was actually the same principle as teleportation designs or spatial wormholes. Of course, whether it was teleportation designs or spatial wormholes, they were fixed in position. But Morongyu could tear them apart at any time. Now, even without the Hichu Luo Shu, Morongyu could travel through space at will. In some situations where he could not use the Hichu Luo Shu, he could also teleport at any time. With the ability to travel through space, I finally don't need to use the Hichu Luo Shu. Morongyu's heart finally relaxed. Chaotic celestial body, Hichu Luo Shu. It was like a sun, emitting an incomparably intense light. Once someone recognized it, everything about Morongyu would be exposed. At that time, even a ruler would make a move to kill him. Therefore, Morongyu had never wanted to use the Hichu Luo Shu. But limited by his own strength, he had no choice but to use the Hichu Luo Shu, especially in a situation where the opponent was far stronger than him. Therefore, Yu had always wanted to find a replacement for the Hichu Luo Shu. Now that he had the ability to travel through space, he did not need any other treasure to replace the Hichu Luo Shu. After increasing by 1 level, the Zai formula did not increase any further. Because of this, Yu's attention once again shifted to the formation formula. Without any suspense, the formation formula made a logical breakthrough not long after. However, unlike the other two formation formula, which had given him a huge surprise, the formation formula did not give him any surprises. The second level of the formation formula allowed Yu to see through a person's heart. The third level only strengthened this ability. Originally, Yu could only see through the hearts of people who were lower than him and did not have their guard up. But after strengthening it, this ability was greatly improved. Yu felt that he could now see through the hearts of people who were on the same level as him, or even higher. Of course, the premise was that the other party was not on guard. If the other party was on guard, not to mention those of a higher level, even those of a lower level would only be able to faintly sense it. In truth, this ability was somewhat useless, but the formation formula did not only have this ability. It also had a rather heaven-defying ability, invisibility. After breaking through to the third level, Yu's invisibility ability had at least doubled, becoming even more powerful and harder to be discovered. After the formation formula was the fighting formula. The fighting formula could directly increase a person's battle strength, and the third level was said to be able to increase one's battle strength by 100-fold. In fact, the difference of a realm was not just a 100-fold difference in strength. The reason why you could fight across a realm was in part because of the fighting formula. After breaking through to the fourth level, Yu did not know how many times his battle strength had increased. But at this time, he vaguely felt that without relying on soul attacks, he had the ability to fight against super powerhouses of the undead stage just by relying on his own cultivation. Fighting across 2 realms. This was the ability of the fourth level of the fighting formula, and it was extremely terrifying. If combined with soul attacks, Yu was confident that he could even kill a high-level undead stage powerhouse, or even a peak undead stage powerhouse. And if promoted to the undead stage, even a profound sage powerhouse would not be impossible to kill. Now, I'm just a little bit away from breaking through to the undead stage. With the continuous breakthroughs of these cultivation methods, Yu was getting closer and closer to the undead stage. Originally, he was only a step away, but now he was only half a step away. Yu believed that once the army formula broke through, his realm would also enter the undead stage. He would become immortal in the true sense. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.